everybody. Welcome to the Development Management Committee, especially on this fireworks night. I ask you to keep any fireworks outside of this meeting. First, I must say that those present at the meeting should be aware that by law it can be recorded by anyone attending. This means the meeting can be filmed, audio recorded, photographed or reported electronically by the use of social media. This does not apply to any part of the meeting that's held in private session. Therefore, anyone present should be aware that they could be recorded at this meeting. Any member of the public who does not wish to be filmed should move to an area of the meeting away from the camera. Anyone recording must cease as soon as the meeting is declared closed. Now, we are going to record this meeting. The camera is there. Is anybody else going to record it? Thank you. So somebody else behind us. So as I say, anybody not wanting to be in view, kindly move now. Item 1, substitution of members.
Councillor Morgan is substituting for Councillor Tunstall.
Thank you.
And Councillor Suniac, who has also submitted his apologies. Councillor Cowan was to have substituted for him, but has received advice from the monitoring officer as he wishes to make representations from the floor on item 7, 22 Parkway. He should not sit as a member of the committee for the duration of the whole.
Right. The mics are on. And then apologies from the same. Thank you. Item 3, minutes. To confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October. Do we agree those?
We agree.
Thank you. Item 4, notification of urgent business to be considered under item 15 and any items withdrawn from the agenda. There is one item we're going to add on the end. Item 5, declarations of interest by members.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 11, a pecuniary interest, as I am an executive board member of the Welling Hatfield Sports Alliance, so I'll be withdrawing from the meeting.
Thank you.
On the planning committee of the town council.
Thank you. I will declare that I'm on Northlands Parish Council as the Angleland Common.
We can't hear you.
Well, we're doing our best.
We'll do better. Do better.
No, I won't hold it. They tend to electrocute you. Right. Item 6, 22 Parkway, Welling Garden City. Change of use from offices B1 to public house A4 and rear 1 and 2 storey extensions.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will note within their packs and within emails that are being sent this week that we have received a number of late items since the report was completed. Hopefully you've had opportunity to see them and assess them. There's also one additional item on the front page relating to the reasons for refusal that I will come to further on in the report. This application is presented to committee because it's been called in by Councillor Cowan because he considers it's a departure and in the public interest for it to be presented to committee. You'll be aware that this application was on a previous agenda in July and that it was withdrawn at the applicant's request in order for them to submit information in relation to transport statement, noise report and also a planning statement. You'll see from the plan on the screen, this is the application site and it's on the western side of Parkway with Parkway running here, John Lewis over here and the campus further north. If we can go to the photos. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the site. It's a typical property that you will get within Welling Garden City on this side of the road. It's part of a conservation area. Its former use was as offices, but it has been unoccupied for some time. The proposal is to add extensions to the property, and if we can just go to further photos along the street. So you can see on this one the view from Parkway looking across the Rees Memorial Gardens as you can see, and if you can remember these photos whilst we come to the later presentation, there's quite a significant amount of landscaping just here, and hedgerow that you can just about sort of see just in this location. As you can see from this photograph, the property in question is very similar to all the other buildings that are along this side of the pathway going towards Roseanne House. They all are very symmetrical design, arts and crafts design, very much in the Louis de Soissons design that came forward when they were built. All of these properties are in commercial use. They were originally built as residential properties, but their uses have changed. And the adjoining property further north is as a doctor's surgery. As you can see from these plans, you've got the front elevation, and as you've seen from the photos, very symmetrical. There is the side elevation just here. To the side boundary over here, you will note that it has been extended in the past with a 3-storey extension just here, and also single-storey extension just here as well. The proposal would add a 2-storey side extension here. This is proposed to allow access into the cellar, which is going to be on the 1st floor. So there's a goods lift just in here that will allow the bottles, etc., to be taken upstairs. You also note just from this little corner that that element is 2-storey, flat roofed, with little architectural representation of the existing property. To this side you will see a small single-storey extension projecting, and when we come to the floor plans, you'll note that the existing chain link fence and post rails are to remain. In this area it's proposed to be a small drinking area. It will be enclosed by a glass balustrade, but obviously this elevation is also changing, and here with the removal of the existing windows and replacement of these bifold doors. To the rear you can see the single-storey extension with bifold doors, and there's quite a significant single-storey extension that extends virtually to the back of the property. There's a small area on the rear that would just allow for what would appear to be a smoking shelter. I anticipate. The floor plans say that it will be, just annotates it as a canopy. So this is the existing floor plan, so it's quite a modest property. And if we go to the proposed, you can obviously see the original here, or as existing, because obviously it has been extended, and quite significant single-storey extension coming here, and the 2-storey element just here. And just here is the standing out area, which would run directly adjacent to Parkway. We have undertaken extensive consultations, as you would expect with a proposal like this, in respect to the additional statements that were submitted. Environmental Health have objected in relation to the use of the garden at the back for use for drinkers in any way at all. They say that it will be significantly harmful to the amenity of surrounding residents. Immediately to the rear of this site is 3-storey property, Asquith House, which is occupied by elderly residents, so obviously they will be there quite a lot. Further north, obviously less impact, directly along Parkway, because they are commercial premises. In respect to all the other noise issues, such as plant, etc., bottling out, bins, odour, and so forth, they have made recommended conditions, but they do object with the use of the garden. In relation to the transport statement, Hertfordshire Highways don't raise any objections in relation to the proposed use in itself, and they have recommended conditions so that the existing access that runs up to the driveway here, because at the moment there's access through to a rear car parking area. As you'll note, the rear car parking area would be lost because of the depth of the extension, and to prevent vehicles from driving in here for unloading, they would like that stopped up, and there will be an unloading bay, if it were to be approved, on Parkway. There's no parking on site. Obviously you'll be aware from our local plan that the adopted standards for this location, because it is in the town centre, is between 0 and 25% of the maximum standards. We've spoken to the council's parking representative, and we've looked at it ourselves. Yes, it would displace car parking with people coming to the pub, and so that would be detrimental to the overall character of the area. However, again, if we had been looking for approval, then we would be looking for Section 106 obligations in order to get the necessary transport parking assessments, and then the proposed mitigation going forwards as well. The late representation, which is the second sheet that you have in your pack, is from Hertfordshire Gardens Trust. Parkway is an unregistered parking garden, and obviously this site is also adjacent to the Rees Memorial Gardens. They raise quite significant objections, this is for the Rees Memorial Gardens, in relation to this proposal that would result in the loss of significant landscaping, harm the symmetry that is on the existing building. And you'll note on the first page amended text in red on the reasons for refusal to reflect their concerns, so also refusing it because of the parking garden. To clarify, because a lot of residents have objected because they consider this isn't part of the town centre, this does fall within the defined boundary of Welwyn Garden City Town Centre. It's not part of the retail core, that stops on the same boundary as John Lewis and the Pig and Truffle, as was, but this does still form part of the town centre. Overall, it's recommended for refusal for the reasons you've got in your late representations, as amended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now we have speaking tonight by members of the public. The rules for speaking are that you get 3 minutes, and after 2.5 minutes I shall shout half a minute, and after the final half minute you will desist. Please come to the microphone there and speak loudly so everybody can hear. The first speaker is Paul Brooke, who is the agent, please.
The microphone at the agent.
Yes, please.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. Good evening, everyone, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to you again. We did have a public meeting some time ago, and I recognise some faces from that meeting there. We do a substantial amount of work for Wetherspoons up and down the country. Wherever we go, though, they are in town and city centres, and we are met with the same issues of noise, odour and traffic issues. We have experts, my client has experts who advise and give reports, and generally speaking, until now, we haven't had any refusal. I speak personally from living in North Cheshire, south of Manchester, from having designed a Wetherspoon in my village, so you can imagine that I'm reasonably well known locally, and bad news travels fast, and there has been absolutely not one objection to the pub. It's been open for 2 years. There's a care home next door, housing adjacent, shops across the road, and absolutely no objection. In terms of the quality of design, we do receive awards from Civic Trust and other people for the quality of design of our buildings. We Alton in Hampshire this week, we just got one from there, where we've just recently completed a similar kind of development of a historic building. We specialise in historic buildings. Turning to planning issues, we have to comply with planning law. The building is within the town centre, so it's an appropriate use within the town centre.
Quiet, please.
It's an appropriate use within the town centre, as these are exactly the sites that Wetherspoons use all the time. We have tried, Wetherspoons have tried to get other sites in this town. We're very keen to be represented in Welwyn Garden City, and I think they would be an asset to your town. Without success, sir. In terms of, so we're in the town centre, as well as complying with guidance notes, there is also a need for committees to take material consideration of other issues. This is a government guideline, and the issues I'd raise with you is that the building is vacant, which we will hopefully overturn, that we are providing at least 50 jobs locally, and that the building itself will be sensitively designed. The front elevation of that symmetrical and is meant might be an arts and crafts building. The symmetry will be retained to a degree, but the extensions are to the rear. The extensions are to the rear. The larger extensions between the two gables will be insignificant. I hope I've helped with your decision, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Members of the public, please give courtesy to the people speaking. It's just, it does no service to this committee or yourselves if you carry on like this. Right, the next speaker is Brian Scott, who, it says, represents the Welwyn Garden City Society and other objectors.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Brian Scott. I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists and an associate of the Institute of Builders. And I speak on behalf of the Welwyn Garden City Society and a large number of individuals who have lodged objections to the application, and specifically the occupants of Asquith House, which is the care home at the rear, whose average age is 82. And they're going to be living 4 to 5 metres from the rear of this extension. Firstly, it's important to register the property that this is not an objection to Wetherspoons or a pub in the Garden City. The objections relate entirely and specifically to this building in this location, no more, no less. In our opinion, the officer's report is fair, factual and balanced. It's not my intention to repeat all the points made in reaching a recommendation for refusal. All the statutory consultees have stated their objections, specifically the police and the Council's own environmental health, with only the highways being sort of ambivalent. It's rather my intention to draw attention to the importance of Parkway as a singular and important feature that defines the town and separates the commercial and retail centre from the adjoining residential areas. It's the green belt at the centre of the town, which is admired across the world. The planning concept is confirmed and supported by policy TCR 11 in the district plan. Abandon this and all the other adopted policies relating to any conservationer may just as well be tossed aside. Further, it will set a precedent in allowing the other buildings forming this distinctive group from 6 to 22 to be converted to pubs, restaurants or even takeaways. The extent of the works would, in my professional judgment, require all except the front and part of each side wall to be demolished and rebuilt to meet the current statutory construction and occupation standards, virtually a rebuild. It would be impossible to build that extension without extensive use of the Rees Memorial Gardens, one of the heroes of the Garden City and the movement. Vehicles have no access to the site. All deliveries and waste collections must take place before 8:30. It has a design occupancy of 500 people plus staff, 4 to 5 metres from the boundary of Asquith House sheltered accommodation.
Half minute.
Drinkers would also smoke outside on the footpath and probably the Memorial Garden space, if not the centre of Parkway. Look at the example of the customers of the Two Willows and the paved area opposite. Damage to the Garden City ethos, context of Parkway and the town centre and the surrounding streets is incalculable. Given the reasons as to why a pub on this site is a bad idea, councillors have no real option other than refusing this application.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right, councillors, comments, questions? Yes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll get the microphone a little closer to me. Officers have made it easier for us because they're recommending refusal. And I think Brian Scott has also clearly identified that this is not an objection to Wetherspoons. This is an objection related to this particular site. And the truth is that it is not, with its particular context, suitable for this type of activity. And if we do change the change of use of this site, not all landlords will be as responsible as Wetherspoons. Once it is available for this type of activity, it will be available always, and therefore the less careful management may well detract even further from the potential detraction of the amenity value that this particular development proposes. The age of the people at Asquith House is significant, and therefore I don't think we who are here to put the layman's voice to the planning team would feel very comfortable with ourselves if we were to add to the noise and general hubbub for people who are enjoying hopefully a long and welcome retirement. The other thing is the parking displacement will be an issue, and that will impact upon people's enjoyment of the area. So again, another aspect that the amenity value of the area will be reduced and will be disadvantaged. And we really, parking has been an issue all over this borough. We as a committee have tried hard to ensure that parking is more important than it has been in the past. It is an issue. We can't add to the problems of the area. The other thing is that there are very early embryonic plans afoot to develop the town centre, because at the moment the shopping offering in the town centre is not attracting as much visitors as really we who are proud of this particular city feel it deserves. That movement may also mean that the epicentre of the town centre moves further to the northeast, away from the west, and therefore this would be even more isolated. And again, it may well mean that Wetherspoons, who like town centre pubs, may feel they'd want to move, and then what have we got? Potentially a badly run pub on the outskirts of town that will do nobody any good. So I absolutely agree with, and it's a delight to be on the side of Wellingborough Garden City Society for once. I absolutely agree with them, and I thank officers for giving significant reasons for the refusal. I say to Wetherspoons, welcome in this city, welcome here, but not in this particular spot. It is not suitable, it is not an appropriate location for this type of business. Thank you.
Councillor Mike Larkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Apart from the fact that if this is built, it will stand out like a sore thumb in that part of town. But the other thing that talked about deliveries when it's actually got when it gets built, but it must be there before half. One thing that nobody's talked about, what about building materials? Where does all the building materials go? Because there is no room on that site for putting building materials. Once you start having to build the extension. So where did you put that? The Rees Memorial Garden? The pavement? That's the only place to go. So it's the wrong place, it's the wrong building, and ask Witherspoon to find somewhere else.
Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Sandra Kyriakides.
Thank you. I love Wetherspoons. They're fantastic pubs, lovely food, well run, and I would love to see one in Welwyn Garden City on the opposite side of the road. I've walked into that little side bit several times and stood there, and you can hear 2 or 3 voices really loudly from the Memorial Garden side. So imagine what it would be like for the residents behind if you had 40, 50 voices. They can stop some things, but they can't stop people talking outside or in the back garden. And the shops at the moment are already suffering in Welwyn Garden City. If we take away any parking, and Wetherspoons, we're not just talking about evenings, we're talking about daytime. Saturday, the shops will suffer because of the places that will be taken up along Parkway, which are fully used for all the shops at the moment. And we can't spare those places. We are hard pushed to find enough for people as it is. So, sorry Wetherspoons, I'd love you to take over the Pig and Truffle, but not this particular building. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm Cowan from the audience.
Thank you very much. This is not an application for Wetherspoons pub, it's an application for pub submitted by Wetherspoons. That means it could change hands today, tomorrow, next week, and whatever comfort you draw from the way that people normally behave in the Wetherspoons pub may be of no value going forward. Indeed, I'm also advised by the council planning officers that were this to be approved, it could then instantaneously change to retail without any planning consent whatsoever. So tomorrow you could turn out and it's a Poundland, it's IKEA, it's whatever your worst nightmare is. So that's another good reason not to accede to this application. The west side of Parkway, okay, nominally it's part of the town centre, but it's designated for offices and sundry activities, the surgeries and the dentists and so on and so forth, not pubs and restaurants. Were this to be approved, as has been said, all the others could be converted. If you don't like the planning policies that officers work to, then change them, don't oppose particular recommendations that come from those. And of course it's not about being about Wetherspoons or any other pub. Nobody has objected, as far as I'm aware, to the Masters that's going up just across the railway line. You know, good location, attractive building, people are looking forward to that, and they would look forward to Wetherspoons in a suitable location in the town centre. We've talked already about the fact it runs up to an old people's home. Who on earth would want their elderly parents or grandparents to live cheek by jowl with something like this? We noticed that the police have objected. We look at the comments of environmental health. We took apart the noise assessment and said they disputed with almost all the assumptions that took place in that led the consultants to, surprise, surprise, thinking it wasn't a problem. We've got the officers telling us how poor the design is. Comment, such poorly designed extensions and this level of overdevelopment would be likely to be unacceptable in any location, but this plot is in the heart of Welwyn Garden City Conservation Area, adjacent to formal areas of urban open land. And it wouldn't be screened because much of the vegetation would be taken away because they want to build right to the very edge. We've seen that some of the matching front windows would be converted to French doors, destroying the symmetry of the building. Again, it's called poor standard design by the officers. I'm baffled by the lack of objection from County Highways, as I am by many of their policies and practices. And I speak as someone who's a member of County Council. They say deliveries must be completed before 8:30 a.m, so there'll be no need for anyone living nearby to have an alarm clock. And if we look at the Transport Consultant's report, on which the Highways officer based so much of his conclusion, it says the proposed development would generate about 800 person trips per day on a weekday and around 2,000 on a Saturday. 2,000 people visiting that site on a day, and somehow they think it won't be a problem. I beg to differ. And they quite clearly say the on-street car parking in the immediate vicinity is well used, i.e. there aren't any spaces. And don't forget these spaces, the current parking on the site will be taken away. So there'll be no parking on site. You've got 5 clear reasons for refusal from officers. Not one of them are on balance. They're all quite clear recommendations. It's the wrong place, it's the wrong application. Please, Wetherspoons, don't give up on Welwyn Garden City, but for God's sake, give up on this site.
Graham, hang on for a moment. Next one is Councillor Jeremy Thompson.
Thank you. As a member of the committee, I'm delighted to be able to speak freely this evening, because up until this I haven't been able to for fear of having predetermined. Having received many objections and concerns from residents, which I know my fellow colleagues Helen and Graham are also concerned at not being able to speak on residents' behalf. So, as I say, I welcome the opportunity to be able to do so now. I know that many of the issues I'm going to mention have already been raised, but I think they are important enough to be repeated again and again. I'm also not anti-Wetherspoons. In fact, I understand they have a good reputation as a national chain. However, as I see it, this is a straightforward application, and as Malcolm has said, there are 5 very good reasons why it should be refused, as it goes against so many of our own council policies. Firstly, as mentioned, the proposed plan breaches the current council planning policy number TCR 11, which we've heard, which is there to protect buildings on the west side of Parkway, which is obviously in a conservation area, and it's to protect against redevelopment and act as a buffer between the retail core and the residential areas which adjoin the town centre. Most importantly, helping to reduce the noise and disturbance for nearby residents. And I think if we fail to abide by these policies, then we're letting down all the people who've bought these houses and properties in good faith. That's the first point. Secondly, the plan doesn't provide for adequate off-road parking. Anyone who lives in Hanside in the area knows that Parkway is busy. We know that the parking bays in front of the adjoining properties, the doctor's surgery and the dentist, are constantly occupied, as are the parking bays around on Russellcroft Road. And as has been mentioned, deliveries, etc. will impact on the availability of those spaces, and not in a positive way. The rear and side extensions, which are in breach of the planning and estate management policies D1, D2, R22 and NPFF, are massively overscaled. And additionally, where to start with this, the glass balustrade, the bifold doors on Parkway are just completely inappropriate. Bifold doors would destroy the plumbing symmetry, despite what the agent said, and the symmetry of the neighbouring buildings, and what is an important part of Parkway visually. The proposed lighting, garden furniture, boundary treatments would be inappropriate as detailed by the Hearts Gardens Trust. So I can't see anything redeeming at the moment. Moving on to overspill from customers onto the adjacent Rees Memorial Gardens, the gardens around the fountain, which would absolutely degrade these beautiful, and in the case of the Rees Garden, quiet areas. They'd be noisy, they'd potentially be unsafe from broken glass, dirty from cigarette butts, and unsuitable for local residents to enjoy, which is currently the case. There's a danger of residents being impacted by overspill crossing the Parkway from customers going from maybe one pub to another, etc., which perhaps would be inappropriate. And however good managers are, I don't imagine they will be able to control that. And additionally, they won't be able to control the problems with broken glass. Most Sunday mornings, there's broken glass outside the Parkway Bar, the Two Willows, and actually we don't want to see this on Parkway around and about the fountain. Most importantly, the impact on the residents of Asquith House. It is a quiet, elderly residential development with a private garden, and it's separated by a thin hedge, and as was mentioned previously, the proposed extension will come up almost to the boundary. And these residents will not be able to open their windows, they will not be able to sit and enjoy the quiet garden if there is a beer garden adjacent and a pub, and that's not appropriate. And that's not even mentioning the cigarette smoke. I think, as has been said, this is not anti-Wetherspoons. The majority of people would welcome the pub coming into the town, but it has to be in the right location. As a Welwyn Garden City Councillor and a member of the Town Centre Partnership, I welcome new business into the town for the increased footfall it brings and business, but this is not an appropriate location. Wetherspoons, very welcome to come to Welwyn Garden City, but not here, and I'll be supporting Officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Councillor Graham Dowden now, but before he starts, I just want, for the benefit of the audience, to ask the officers one thing. Is it possible to restrict the user of such an application to a named party only?
You can do personal permission.
You can do personal permission. So if then they then left, it would revert to what? The previous user.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, we'll be thinking about that. Graham.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to first of all just thank Fiona for her presentation and all the people who spoke before me, who you may have heard that I wasn't going to be able to speak tonight, but at 7:15 tonight I still couldn't speak. But it was when I got an email through from Grant Chapps, who I've been speaking to, he did quote a particular localism act which gave me permission to speak tonight. I hadn't obviously prepared 3/4 of an hour before the meeting a proper speech to you good people, so I'm very glad I've actually gone last, I think, as a speaker, because my colleague Mr. Cowan, Fiona and the members of the public have all really said what I wanted to say, and that was about the noise, about the parking, and particularly also about the Rees Gardens next door, who we can see here is a picture of Richard Rees in the home that he wanted. And that memorial garden was built, with him in mind, which I'm very grateful to have a copy of. So the transport, the noise, and one of the things that, yes, we've talked about the noise in Asquith House before, and this was one of my hotspots. The fact that the folks of Asquith House who have turned out, in numbers tonight, why they're not going to be they open their windows during the summer, but anything else, they'll have noise, they'll have smoke, all those things that will affect their standard of living in that place. And also, I was going to say about the school up the road, the noise into the school, and then maybe the swearing and what. Well, we've all been in pubs, and people do actually tend to swear in pubs, funny enough. And that's inappropriate, I think, during the school break. So as I say, really everything I wanted to say has been said. But one thing that hasn't been said tonight, I would like to say, is look at all these people. Look at all these people that have come tonight to listen to the presentation on Wetherspoons. I've never seen so many people at a planning meeting, and I have to say, well, you may have done, but I haven't. And they're here. And so I'm saying to the planners, if they're all here, and I would suggest to object to this. I would say that as our residents, as our voters, or whatever you want to call them, we need to respect these people. We need to respect them for turning out tonight. We need to respect what a lot of their unsaid thoughts and words, and vote against this application, as has been previously said. Thank you.
I would just add that the decisions made at the development management committees are based on planning law, not on the number of people that come to the meetings. That's quite important.
You should listen to people more.
Mandy.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask a question? Please, can you keep that elevation there? I also, I know quite a bit about Wetherspoons. I come from Barnet, and Barnet was one of the early Wetherspoons pubs. There was one thing missing on there, and that is a sign, because normally any pub will have a sign on it to tell the world that it's a pub, and my concern is what a sign might look like on that part of Parkway.
Thank you. Okay, we'll just hear the answer from the officers.
If Wetherspoons were to gain permission, implement it, and it was personal permission, if they were to vacate, then somebody else would have to come along and apply for planning permission in order to either continue that use or change it to something else. However, if you were looking to approve it, you would need a good or a sound planning reason for why it's personal to Wetherspoons, why a different pub owner, could be me, change of career, might not be acceptable. Do you need that planning reason as well, why it needs to be personal to them?
Okay, we'll have one last, I think, from Councillor Alan Chesterton.
It's okay, I'm going to go with the officer's recommendations, but I've got to point out to the public that we can only go on what is in front of us, not what's going to go in the future, what other houses or offices in this row are going to be. The other thing is, when I looked at the original drawings and what have you, I thought, oh, it's going to be a nice little pub. But when I saw the extensions that are going to be put in place, if somebody came along to have an extension put on their bungalow or their house, would have thrown it out. So I think we'll have to go with officers' recommendations. And Wetherspoons, I do like your pubs, I like your designs, but and some of your prices on the curry nights, I think it's Thursday. But I think the majority here looked at what we've got in front of us, not what we perceive or we imagine will happen in the long run. I've lived opposite the Chieftain pub for over 30 years. Yeah, fair enough. Sunday morning, 8:30, they were emptying the bottles. But thankfully, I'm going a bit mutton Jeff, so I will be agreeing with the officers. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank you for that, and it is important that Wetherspoons take away from us tonight the view that they would be welcomed in the town. Certainly it's not a dry town, and we all like a good pint of beer as much as anybody else, but we're talking about position and size and amenity and everything. John?
Shall I
yes.
make a proposal? Thank you, Chairman. Well, of course, this is probably the most sensitive, I'll call it the road in Wellington. This is the heart of Wellington City, and therefore I have no hesitation at all in proposing that we follow the officer's recommendation on this matter.
Thank you. Second. And the late representation.
And the late representation.
Thank you. Seconded from Sandra.
Chair, before we vote, may I ask for a recorded vote, please, given the level of public interest?
Don't have look committees.
Don't have look committees. Okay. Those in favour of accepting the officer's recommendation, which is to refuse the plan application, please show. That's everybody. Yes, that's unanimous. Okay.
Record it as unanimous.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was unanimous, and the application is therefore refused. A 2 or 3 minute break now, while those that want identify
Anyway, so I'll talk to you on the weekend. Hello, dear man. Carry on with the meeting. That's all right. Right. Yeah.
It's coming in now.
dear.
Why are we?
Okay, item number 7, 50 Reynards Road, Welling. Erection of grinding room, vehicle servicing, ancillary office and staff facilities following demolition of existing stores, storage building and removal of old cabins. And councillors will remember, it's not all that long ago, we went to look at this site.
This application is presented to committee because it's been called in by Councillor Perkins for the reasons given in paragraph 4.1. And to paraphrase it, it was because the committee requested that the height of the roof be reduced as part of the previous application. I'm sure for all of those of you who were on committee last year, you'll be very familiar with the site that you just saw on the site plan as just vanished. Yeah, you've got the access road going up here and all the buildings were to the rear, and land slopes quite significantly from being lower down here to upper level up here, and this is a private roadway going down towards Welling and beyond. The proposal is to raise the roof. Of this little bit here. So this is the top left-hand corner as you looked at the site plan, so the northwestern corner. All of this, go to the next one. So this is this element here. So if you can remember from the site visit, because there were a few bits and pieces and paraphernalia around, there was existing buildings on the side boundary that were to be demolished, one of which you can just see has the pitched roof there. So that will be demolished to make way for this extension here. Unfortunately the colour hasn't come out, so it's difficult to see. But that is the proposal, and just here, if I can keep my hand still enough, is the bit that was approved, just below and a little bit wider. So if you, can you see the differences in the height? So that is all the differences compared to what was previously approved. Officers considered, yes, it is larger, however, being a 60 centimetre increase in height and still lower in height than the existing building there, that it is acceptable. And it's recommended for the reasons or the conditions in the report. But if you note, you have got an item 7 within your report, which the only difference is it's condition 1 in relation to the drawings, and it refers to ACTRA cut-off floodlighting detail so that we can control the lighting on the site so that it's not harmful to the green belt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. 2 speakers on this, and the first one is James Borry, who is an objector.
I'm a resident in the road of Reynolds Road, and it's a very quiet private road, which isn't really industrial. The previous application was approved by a vote with a strict condition that it reflected the facts of the applicant had the usage of. It's already increased the building by considerable size over the years. One of the preliminary reasons for the approval was the massive increase in the enclosure, which was a grinding room. The new revised application seeks to replace that into a small plant room with the space previously used for grinding as additional offices. The application was approved on the basis the applicant would be limited in terms of additional traffic, hours of operation and noise levels. Given the planning committee were very concerned about the increased traffic levels and the only approved application on the basis of restricted, how would this be applied and imposed? The current certificate of lawfulness on the site does not include vehicle servicing. The use of the buildings are restricted to planning for storage, maintenance and horticultural equipment. The application for planning requires separate change of use. Thank you.
Thank you. The second speaker is Councillor Mary Perkins.
Thank you, committee. Members will recall that this application was the subject of much debate when it was presented to Development Management Committee last August. Indeed, it had been deferred from the previous month pending a site visit. You'll remember that a great deal of the debate centred around the activities to be undertaken in and the design and particularly the height of the grinding room. Indeed, the officer report included a recommendation to amend Condition 2 concerning a reduction in the roof height of the building that was, at that time, proposed to be the grinding room. I was therefore very surprised to see a new application just 10 months later, and that the said application included a proposed new building to house the grinding room. That the intended new building proposed to have a roof height greater than what was approved last year is just unbelievable. Members of Development Management Committee take their role very seriously, as has just been seen in the previous application, and consider all aspects of an application. There is a point of principle involved when an applicant comes back within a year and appears to ignore what the committee debated and agreed. All of the other points I made last year regarding noise, highways, vehicle movements, etc. apply to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors?
Thank you, Chair. I agree 100% with what Mandy has said. And could I ask Lisa what the actual roof height that they're putting in is at the moment? What is the height that they have asked for? Not of the little extension, but the actual revised plans. Because it shouldn't be more than 4 metres, should it?
The height of the rest of the building is exactly as was approved in 2014. The only element with this that is changed with this application is this element here, where you probably can see it a bit better now. So the red line is what was approved, and that little black bit there is what is now proposed. So it's slightly slimmer, but slightly taller.
And the actual height of these plans is 4 metres, it's not higher than 4 metres?
That building here is 4 metres, these are higher, but then they always were higher.
But we have recommended that with the rebuilding that they would be 4 metres?
Not on these buildings to the side, it was...
Only on the lower
yes.
one? Right. Okay. Also, the previous application was approved on the basis that the applicant would be limited in terms of additional vehicle traffic, hours of operation and noise levels, but they weren't actually able to say how many vehicles were going to be going up and down the road. So how can they estimate that it'll be another 3 if they weren't able to give an exact number in the first place?
There's no changes in this application in that regard compared to the previous. Councillors asked last time for the additional condition regarding traffic movements and for record keeping because of the concerns by local residents. All of the conditions that officers proposed last time, together with that one that was agreed with the committee, went on to the decision and then replicated here. The only condition that is different is condition 1 relating to the drawing numbers because of this drawing being different.
And is there some reason why they can't have the grinding room in its original location that they had originally applied for?
To my knowledge, no. I just think it's far easier for their working system and operation, but if it is here, it gives them the better facilities and movements, etc., that they need within the building.
Thank you.
Okay, just the height of the new proposal isn't 4 metres, is it? It's 3. So on page 25, it says the plant room element granted under the previous was 2.3 and the proposed northern extension requirement is 3. So it's 3 metres rather
yes,
than
sorry,
4.
yes. 0.6 difference.
Yeah, 0.6. Okay, Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel hamstrung on this. We've given the previous application acceptance. Had I been here in August 2014 instead of elsewhere, I think I'd have expressed very serious concerns about traffic movements for this particular road, and I still feel that is the big issue. Whilst I wish John O'Connor as a local business well, I don't think this is a suitable site for them to effectively consolidate their operations from, which is what is going to happen. We'll not be able to control the vehicle movements, and the local residents will suffer as a result of it. Unfortunately, I can't see a planning reason why, having previously given the go-ahead, that this very small amendment can be overturned. And even if we here decided to overturn our officer's recommendation, I do not think that a planning inspector would support us, and I think we would be simply wasting everybody's time and giving false hope. So, reluctantly, I'm going to have to agree with the officer's recommendation, and with a very sad heart. And I wish we had done better last August, but we didn't. Hey-ho.
For the same reasons, unfortunately.
Thank you. Yeah, on the surface of this application, 60 centimetre height difference isn't hugely different. However, as has been mentioned, I think there are other concerns which perhaps I know we're not determining tonight, because we, as Steve has said, we accept that there will be parking or traffic movement issues. However, I am somewhat concerned that if this gets approval tonight, that 6 months' time we'll get another request for an amendment. And I know we're not going to take that into account, but however, if you look at the planning history, we have already had some amendments. So I will not be supporting officers' recommendations on this because I have concerns.
Okay, I think in deciding tonight, Stephen has set out the nub of the matter. You know what has already been approved, and you know how it will change with this proposal. We are not rehearsing the first application, we are doing this present one. And what you have to consider as councillors tonight, the members of this committee, is whether this amount of the increased area, footprint, etc., and volume is sufficient to reject the planning application. And the officer's view is that it is a small addition and therefore not sufficient to reject the application. And actually you have to put out of your mind whether or not we feel it was properly agreed in the first place. You can only look at this. Okay, may I have a proposal then?
Hello, Chairman. I share the irritation of members over this, but having said that, as you've rightly said, the change is so marginal that it would be very difficult to support an objection, and therefore with a heavy heart, as Stephen would say, I recommend that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. With the amendment.
With the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay.
May I have someone second that, please? Right, seconds it. All those in favour, please show. Eight. Those against? Okay, that's carried. 8 to 6. Thank you. The next item is plot 6000, Hatfield Business Park. Erection of a private healthcare facility, use class C2, to include car, cycle parking, boundary treatment, landscaping, lighting and access.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start the presentation, members should be aware of two packages of late items. One was sent, I believe, to members at the beginning of the week that included revised plans showing tracking manoeuvring plans and a revised plan showing some parking changes at the back end of the site near Manor Road, where there's a turning facility used by residents. The initial one, the second one, is being presented in tonight's pack as a separate item. It's a separate sheet to the one that contains the late items in respect to the parkway. That particular late item is presented on behalf of the officers after the negotiations with environmental health officers in the last 10 days to secure 2 extra conditions, and I'll come to them shortly as to where they sit in terms of the appraisal of the application. So the application is presented to the committee because of the anticipated level of public interest in the site. Now, the site is known as Plot 6000, which actually includes that quadrant as well. So in terms of Plot 6000, it's the whole of that site there. And this application was granted as part of the wider master plan for the Hatfield Aerodrome guidance and the SPG that was granted in 1999. This application, which followed in 1999, was an outline application for various uses on the site. And you can see from members' agenda on page 33 that the site itself has become very successful. It's one of the most thriving business parks in South East England, with 3/4 of its square footage now complete and developed out. In terms of the site itself, just going to the photographs, basically the access to the site, this is quite important in terms of the egress and access for vehicles, and also where it has potential impact on residents of Manor Road. We'll come off the roundabout of Mosquito Way where the Porsche dealership is. So you basically come off the roundabout, the Porsche dealership's on the right hand side, and here access will be gained at a point about there. That's the back of the site in terms of the rear boundary that at the minute is occupied by mature Lombardy poplars, although they are not in a fantastic shape in terms of their long-term prospects. And the key properties here are about 15 properties on Manor Road, obviously with a road in between. That's the site access point, so that's looking across the site, and the trees there in the foreground and the background of the picture, the Lombardy poplars I referred to just earlier, with Manor Road properties set close behind in the background. And that's just a basic, just a picture of the existing site, which is rough grassland. The proposal comprises a 2-storey building, which would provide elective surgery to people in terms of a private situation. That basically is planned in advance rather than done in an emergency situation, which is quite important in terms of emergency vehicles, ambulances and sirens, this type of things that could happen and be seen to normal hospital situation. Going back to the layout of the site, access, as I say, will come from here, at the point here, of the dealership with the Porsche here. And the footprint of the building is outlined here, with parking on the 2 sides and going back towards Manor Road itself. The footprint of the building measures 80 metres by 70 metres in depth, and it's got a maximum height of 10 metres, 10.5 metres, which mainly is in this building here, the frontage building, whereas the main access point, the atrium building here, and the most focal point of the entrance. Towards the back, and I'll come to the elevations in a minute, it drops to single storey. So the main issues with the application, basically the principal, the parking situation, the impact on residential amenity, and the requirement to possibly consider the variation to the 106 agreement. In 1999, the 106 agreement that was linked to the Outline Planning Commission, and that set out the land uses that were going to be acceptable on the site. It didn't include hospital at that time, but did include a hotel for this site. Unfortunately, the hotel provider has not come forward, and that's not been able to develop in terms of the hotel vision in 1999. There is 3 hotels, I think, close by that is the problem there. So in terms of principle, and in employment terms, and bearing in mind the policies of EMP1 and EMP2 of the district plan, we've concluded that the swap of the use from hotel to hospital is acceptable in land use terms and economic growth, and we think a flexible approach needs to be taken. In terms of the highway parking, with no objections received from highways in the county council or from the highways agency on the more strategic network, where the conclusions are that there'll be 35 fewer trips across the combined peak times, the AM and the PM times, and also that the 122 spaces, the car parking spaces, sits with the SPG and the interim planning guidance on parking standards. So the parking's fine, the access is fine, and the trips in terms of the ability of the network to cope is acceptable. The HCC do want a £6,000 contribution though to monitor and look after travel plan monitoring and management to ensure the wider travel plan for the estate are managed into the future. Going to the elevations, I think it's quite important to look at the elevations here in terms of the approach that's been taken in terms of the design concept. This elevation here is if you were looking from the side elevation, so basically you've come in at this point here and you've come down the left hand side, so that's looking directly across the site with the Porsche set up behind here. Here is Manor Road, so if you can imagine that the black, you can see the black here is the properties on Manor Road and the road across here. And what happens, we've got like a stepped single storey and then the two-storey element and a slightly higher roof void here. So basically it moves across from a single storey up to the two-storey element at the far side there, which I think is good in terms of the impact on residents, which I think is quite important. In terms of the spacing standards, the elevation that will be viewed by the residents in Manor Road is this elevation here. So they will see a single-storey footprint along the main Manor Road, with that's actually some screening to the ventilation and the equipment that's required to facilitate the actual plant room and that type of facility, with the two-storey element in the back. That's probably going to be the nearest elevation in terms of two-storey. There are 3 actual bedrooms upstairs. There are 3 bedrooms at the first floor level within the hospital, and the distance is about 21 to 25 metres across the road to properties in Manor Road. Normally you'd look to get 20 metres between two-storey, residential to residential. So you know, we're meeting the standard there. So that is quite important that we have that separation distance explained, and it does meet that standard. In terms of the actual design, obviously it's a very contemporary design. It fits with most of the modern buildings that's seen across the business park. There's white cladding, there's aluminium finishes here, and some green cladding, which I think complements probably the corporate image of the hospital itself. Now it will see in terms of the other modern buildings on the side. Now, in terms of the layout, in terms of the amenity of Manor Road. We have obviously been in discussion with environmental health, and it is quite important that I raise some issues. Firstly, there'll be no access at all to Manor Road itself, so everything comes from this front portion of the site here. There is a turning facility there, I think it's used by residents of Manor Road. That's been realigned due to some contours and level changes here to reflect the parking positions and provision here. So that should work comfortably now. Now, in terms of the landscaping strip, the plan is to remove the trees, the Lombardy poplars. They're not actually going to last very long. They're a poor species. They provide limited amenity, and the plan is to create a more linear landscape strategy that sits in terms of species and planting distances with the wider image and strategy that's been developed through the park itself. So there will be a landscaping condition imposed to make sure we get back there substantial planting, and I think there's mounding proposed as well to give it a little bit of a buffer in terms of visual and maybe the acoustic side of things. In terms of the noise testing, the access and the main delivery point will be there, so vehicles will come in here and the access in and out there, that's basically a vehicle shown there, a lot of going in and out of the site. We've got conditions, firstly, to control deliveries and the loading of vehicles in and out. and that will be protected, so it happens between 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening. So there'll be no deliveries or loading or anything coming after 7 p.m. in the evening, which I think is good in terms of the amenities of the residents. So I know I've suffered some issues with the Arla development, which is here. Secondly, we've got a condition regarding some of the plant facilities that are going in the roof area here, to make sure that they are 10 decibels below background noise levels. That's quite important that we get that, to make sure that the amenity of residents here, especially on social hours, are not detrimentally impacted on. We have got a condition to ensure that happens, which to submit the information, the plant technology, the specification, to achieve that decibel reading. But we felt, and going back to members' late item, that we wanted that to be tested out before the actual hospital came into operation, really, to make sure that is achievable, which is an acceptable reading in terms of residential amenities, so it can coexist with other non-residential uses. So that condition is to be imposed. The condition is quite lengthy, and it goes on to say if that was to fail, there's got to be other mitigation measures put in place to make sure that that decibel reading is achieved. So these are key important elements that we felt was necessary in terms of the residents of Manor Road. And in terms of light pollution, the light report suggests there'll be no overspill of light to Manor Road itself and to the residents in terms of light dispilling. And we have got a condition on the late item as well, although it is covered in the report, to make sure that it's in accordance with the light specification and details that were received a few weeks ago. So that is another important element of the scheme. In terms of the application, because it's now a hospital use and not the hotel use, we've got to amend and deviate the 106 that involves third parties, including St Albans Council, to make sure that the land use sits with the 106. So we have to have a deed of variation signed and delivered to make sure the new hospital facility sits with the earlier planning permission in 1999. So in terms of the conclusion, we feel that the conditions will protect amenity, it's acceptable in highway transport impact, and it sits with the policies of the district plan and the MPPF in terms of economic growth, job creation, and we feel that the use can exist, can be accommodated within this site. So subject to the 106 being satisfactory signed, and monies to secure us the £6,000 for travel plan in position, we're recommending the application be approved.
Okay, thank you. 2 speakers on this one tonight. And the first is Adrian Stevenson, who is the agent.
Chairman, committee members, my name is Adrian Stevenson. I'm Managing Director of the proposed hospital. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. We've worked with local doctors, GPs and hospital specialists for a number of years to find the right site to create a state-of-the-art new hospital to serve Hatfield and environs. Hatfield, and specifically this site, is the doctor's preferred site. The new hospital will provide much needed capacity for NHS and other patients waiting for their operations. The local NHS hospitals are effectively full to capacity and they need more resources, which we can help to provide. We will work in partnership with the NHS to increase patients' choice and provide care to patients closer to home. In terms of jobs, we'll create around 120 jobs once the hospital is open, and these jobs are new and much needed in the community. We will establish an apprentice scheme to encourage young people and local students to pursue a career in healthcare. We have listened. We're aware that through the officers that some concerns have been raised over parking, traffic and noise, and I'd like to give you some reassurance on these points. In terms of car parking, as the officers said, we sought to create 122 parking spaces in our proposals. In terms of traffic, our core hours run from 7 AM to 8 PM, meaning that traffic movements from nurses' shift changes are outside of Highways Network's peak period. Our contribution, therefore, to peak traffic time will therefore be minimal. In terms of noise, our patients need peace and quiet too. We won't have blue light services routinely visiting the hospital. So we've listened and we've learned and your concerns, and we want to be a good neighbour. The benefits to you and the local community is that the hospital is not just about treating people who are ill. It's also more so investing in occupational health and workplace medicine for local businesses, particularly within the park and in the environs, to keep the workforce fit, well and at work. So it's about prevention, not just cure. The hospital will cost around £40 million and generate over £15 million per annum in revenues and boost the local economy. The hospital will intend to provide the highest standards of care to you and the community you live and work in. I ask the committee to ensure that the doctors, nurses and other healthcare professionals' vision now becomes a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second speaker is James Young, who is an objector.
For the last 3 years, residents have been complaining about noise and working with the Environmental Health Department to establish the excess noise from fans, generators running at night from the PCL building. This has never been finalised and is a current ongoing noise complaint. In section 10.34 of the proposal, it says that the noise will not breach 10 decibels below the current background noise. Surely this is irrelevant due to the noise level already being generated by the 24/7 lorries thundering up and down Hatfield Road and Mosquito Way, together with the noise of the cooler fans and the generators. These are already a blight on Garden Village. Noise generated from the proposed hospital of a plant room with 16 external fans plus multiple air handling units has to be agreed and tested beforehand. The plant room and external fans should be positioned at the furthest point and directed away from the residential area. The original master plan for the development of the BAE site put great importance on the development of the site adjacent to the existing housing, in that it was supposed to be done sympathetically to the buffer zone, with buffers between. This appears to have been ignored in a proposal as the site of the development is too close to the existing boundary. There appears to be no clear plans as to what trees outside the boundary line are remaining untouched. A line of trees and hedges should be placed between the boundary of plot 6000 and Manor Road, as this would be more aesthetically pleasing than the brick wall of a staged two-storey building. Although the proposed hospital with a stepped roof would be the same as the homes in Manor Road, the hospital appears imposing with the higher in perspective to the current homes. The homes in Manor Road are significantly lower than Manor Road, so they're set down. Okay. Based on the plans, we feel there is insufficient parking for staff, outpatients and visitors, which would impede on local residents. The plans state 122 spaces, but we feel this does not allow enough contingency spaces for patients arriving early or late, or delays on appointment times. Illustrated on plan reference 1005 PL 402, the plans show the proposed pedestrian access to the full is via the turning circle in Manor Road. This can't be allowed and will significantly increase parking issues at the end of Manor Road. As a neighbourhood, we struggle with parking as the majority of houses have shared drive and we already suffer from commuter parking. The vehicle and pedestrian access should only be via Hatfield Avenue, and there should be no pedestrian access via this route.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Councillors? Sorry.
Thank you. My only concern with this, and it is a major one, is the parking provision, which I feel is inadequate. 122 sounds a lot, but it actually isn't. And the reason I know this is because, other than being a counsellor, I go and advise medical staff in some private hospitals from a patient perspective, what patients expect and what kind of treatment. And so I visit private hospitals quite a lot, and they are always oversubscribed with parking. You can never find a space anywhere. They do go out onto the roads around. And just looking at what is being provided, if you've got 10 consulting rooms, you've got 10 consultants 10 cars. You've got your operating theatres, which will give you 16 to 20 people. Treatment rooms, heaven knows how many. Your ensuite, 30. You're going to have one visitor for each person easily. You're looking at 56 to 60 spaces taken up, and that's not including nursing staff, admin, maintenance and kitchen staff. So where are all the visitors and other people who are coming in for outpatient treatment going to go? I think you might find that they will spill over onto the roads, and I just wondered what provision is being made for that. It's my only query.
Okay, well, ask about the parking.
Yeah, I mean, there's detailed analysis being done on this, and that's in the report actually, again, 10.25. Initially, a 30-bed hospital would equate to 60 car parking spaces. But what's been done, there's been a breakdown of the actual consulting rooms, ancillary staff, and spaces per consulting room. So obviously it's been analysed in terms of the SPG and the supplementary planning guidance on parking standards, and the pre-app that we did on this application came out with the figure 122, which obviously is the 30-bed hospital, because we've seen that it's not an actual hospital where the people coming and going, you know, it is by appointment generally, and we felt, having looked at the standards and how it would operate, which it's been based on it being a breakdown of 10 consulting rooms, 4 operating theatres, 3 treatment rooms, and the MRI imaging suite. But it's the ancillary staff that potentially causes a little bit of a problem. But we feel that 122 spaces, which has moved from the pre-app that we give advice on in consultation with the HCC to the submission of the application, will work and will accommodate the end use. So there's no impact on adjacent roads. And in particular Manor Road, we're just going back to the concern of the resident, there will be definitely no pedestrian access to Manor Road, and if members felt that was a concern in terms of link trips and people being able to park in Manor Road if there was to be overspill, I would be happy to put an extra condition on notwithstanding the permission. There can be no vehicle or pedestrian access at any time go through on that northern boundary, which I think would protect all residents in Manor Road,
Okay,
which I think we could enforce them.
Steve?
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Duncan Bell was quite right to submit this for consideration, because we have had noise issues in Salisbury and Hatfield Garden City, and I'm hoping that we're learning the lessons, because our original vision of offices, manufacturing, all on one site, and then a bridge with then residential accommodation very close by, so hopefully reducing carbon footprints and all the other stuff that goes with planning these days. What we failed to remember is that businesses these days tend to be 24/7, and a lot of old-fashioned businesses that were 9 to 5 are no longer the case, and so we have to be very mindful of when we do this kind of exercise in future, that we have maybe zones within zones to ensure that the public themselves, the people who are resident, are not impacted by the businesses that we obviously want. I would have thought that had there been a hotel here, there would be plant and equipment on roofs anyway. So I think it is vital, and I'm glad to see that a noise remedial policy condition is going to be put in, because I think it is important that the general hubbub and hum at night can be disturbing, particularly in summer when you want to have windows open. You want to be able to reasonably enjoy an airy room without it being, the hub and hum of traffic, etc. So I'm glad to see that. I'm concerned at the removal of trees only from the point of view that are we going to replace it height for height? Because you know, I think visually, if I was one of the houses in Manor Road, I'm used to looking at trees at the moment, and now I'm going to see, albeit it looks, although modernistic, it doesn't look a particularly unattractive building, but at the same time, it needs to be softened. So hopefully, in the landscaping conditions that we are imposing, we will look for height to break up so that there's not a monotonous view from Manor Road. Manor Road itself just peters out. It sort of ends, and so you do have problems with people who are wanting to go elsewhere. They park there, and it effectively becomes a one-way street, and it can be a bit of a nuisance. So we don't want to add to the problems there. So the 122 car parking spaces, the question I have to ask is, some hospitals, most, impose charges for visitor parking. I'm assuming that this is not intended here. If it's not intended, are we able to put a condition that parking charges cannot be imposed so it doesn't lead to displacement parking? Is that something that we can achieve? Otherwise, I feel that in terms of what could be there, a warehouse or what have you, which would have very much a 24-hour noise profile, I think this might be a reasonable compromise. It's not dissimilar to a hotel in that the guests in the hospital will want a quiet night themselves, as would hotel visitors. So in terms of the change of zoning for this, I don't think this is an unhappy compromise. So with that concern about parking charges aside, I think I will agree with the officer recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Sorry, Nick was next.
I was going to raise 2 points. The first one, Steve has mainly covered about the sound issues. The second one, I just wanted to say I thought the bit about parking was good, because I know it's a slightly different operation, but being the ward council in Hollybush where the QE2 is, I've said it before, but parking is the thing that comes up time and time again around, especially around the hospital. And I think anything we can do to help the residents of Manor Road is a good thing, and the condition that we talked about, I thought would be fantastic if we could do that.
Okay, thank you, Fiona.
Thank you. I would echo points made by Stephen and Nick, and would suggest the hospital introduce a permit parking scheme for its clients. Just picking up on something James Young said about the impact on the residents in Manor Road, I absolutely agree, and I think Steve, you touched on it. If they've been used to a wall of trees, then actually for those to disappear would be hugely detrimental. And I know we have seen in Mount Pleasant site where inadequate screening was not replaced. That's not a negative. And therefore we need to ensure, and I think you said it as one of your conditions, if this gets approval, that actually a comprehensive planting scheme has to be agreed, which includes mature trees. So it's not appropriate to put in 2-year-old trees, because actually that will take many, many years to create the same effect as the mature poplars have now, and I think that's really, really important for the residents of Manor Road. Interesting aspect about the noise. Having, the site having had outline permission for a hotel, absolutely there would have been associated noise with that from plant and machinery. So I'm not sure the noise would be that much different. Do we know, Andrew, are there any proposals for anything like a burning facility on site, commonly known as an incinerator, as it is a hospital? And the reason I ask is, hospitals normally burn their waste because it's contaminated, it's hazardous waste. I was a nurse, I know that's what they do. So I would be keen to know what proposals there are for getting rid of their contaminated waste, because if it involved burning on site, I think I would have huge concerns, especially for local residents. Parking we've touched, boundary screening. I think in principle we know the health services is under pressure, and so I'm not against the principle of a hospital on this site, and if it can help to alleviate pressures for all residents, then I think it could be a good thing, providing we mitigate against the local things.
Okay, thank you. Howard?
As the ward councillor, there were a number of items I'd written down here to bring up, but unfortunately or fortunately, I think everybody stole my thunder. You don't like using the word incinerator when talking about Hatfields, but there will be incinerator, and obviously there will be, from operations, there will be bloody waste, and that's not a swear word, that's genuine, and perhaps body parts and things like that. Are they incinerated on site, or are they taken away?
Obviously it will be clinical waste. I'm just thinking on the discussion that's happened here, a couple of points of perhaps strengthening the conditions. One, the landscaping, so I'll just go in reverse order how they've been raised. So in terms of landscaping, we can just strengthen the landscaping condition perhaps to make sure we get established pot heights of trees to go in, so they can go in at a certain height, so we're not looking at 3-4 years for them to establish. So we get back the species, obviously, which we can agree, and they go in at certain pot heights in semi-mature form. So that screening is provided imminently, straight away. I think we need an extra condition about no pedestrian access onto Manor Road. So that becomes a third extra condition from the two earlier. And maybe a scheme for disposing of waste, just a condition, a scheme of disposal to be submitted into and approved by the local planning authority, something like that, because I'm not aware of what the intentions are, so I can't confirm either way. I doubt there will be an incineration, but I don't want to be in a position to say, oh no, at this stage I'm not aware of the proposals. And so I think strengthen include the access conditions, strengthen the landscaping to get that treatment in a mature form along the boundary. And a scheme for the waste generated to be approved by perhaps our environmental health or health and safety executive. I don't know what type of waste it is. Perhaps they would just give ourselves and residents a little bit more comfort.
Thanks. You answered my question about the screening, because we found with PCL and their air conditioning units, we've had lots of problems with those, so I'm sure you're fully aware of them. I'm sure James from the Garden Village is also fully aware of that, and that's an ongoing problem. Car parking, that gives me worries as well, but you've assured us, as my fellow councillor Duncan Bell mentioned, that there'll be no access from Manor Road. That's okay. Other than that, it's a strange thing that most of the noise from PCL comes out in Home Road and Broadacre and not in Manor Road. Most of the complaints we've had were from there, so it sort of goes over the roofs. But anyway, we can only do our best on that one. And I think really everything else has been covered in the last.
Okay, thank you. Alan? Oh, sorry, well, do we have the answer?
Yeah, the applicants just advised me that waste is taken off-site and they would be happy with the condition.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Howard's already answered my questions.
Okay, thank you. Mandy next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm slightly concerned about this issue of whether to charge or not to charge for parking. And I think probably Fiona's suggestion about having some sort of permit or some sort of acknowledgement as to who is parked there. I've been on this council too long, and I remember that before parking charges were introduced at the QE2, nobody could park at the QE2 and were parking on the roads because the car park was full of commuters, because it happens to have a Green Line bus stop immediately outside it. So I think we need to be quite careful about what happens on this site as far as parking is concerned, because if you charge, then people will go and park elsewhere. If you don't charge, the commuters will park there, and as James has already said, there is commuter parking in Manor Road now. And I would like to say just one other thing. Thank you very much to the Planning Department and Environmental Health for, during the course of this week, coming up with this additional condition that a noise survey must be taken prior to the commencement of any works.
Thank you. The planning officers are always worthy of praise. Can I just say that in 2 recent private hospitals that I visited, patients and visitors go into the reception and they get a little card or even a scrap of paper in one of them that has a little parking permit. Yes. No charge for it. You put it on your car, and so other people can't park there because you're not paying for it. And that seems to work very well. Okay, Kathy next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was some talk about plant noise. I just wanted to check where the fans are. Are they on the Hatfield Avenue or the Manor Road side? Do we know?
Yeah, they're on Manor Road, the Manor Road side.
Right, okay.
They're in an area, it's difficult on plan, but they are in an area there. And if I can just go back, to the elevations, I believe that is looking at it from, I don't know, a midpoint on Manor Road. They're sat behind these grills or louvres, whatever they're called, exactly, I don't know the term, but they're actually sat behind there, in the flat roof area.
Right, so it is important.
So it is, in answer to the question, more on the Manor Road side, which is why we felt it necessary to be watertight on the noise implications of this plant.
Modern air conditioning systems can be fairly quiet. They don't have to be noisy. They're not like the old ducks that come out of chip shops and roar away. However, I expect the silence has to be paid for, and the more expensive ones you buy, the quieter they are. Right, Mike's next.
Just a quick one, Chair. Plot 6,000, they're not using the whole of the plot. Is there any plans to deal with what's left? And the other one is, if I remember rightly, you say that the 106 agreement we need to get re-signed. Does that mean every single person who signed the original 106 has got to sign the amendment? Because if I remember rightly, there was an awful lot of signatures on that 106 agreement.
I'd have to check it. I think there's 3 main parties: the Sells County Council, I think it's St Albans District Council, City Council. St Albans.
I thought every single site owner, there was more than 3 signatories to the original 106 agreement, if I remember right.
I'm not quite sure. I mean, it goes back to 1990. There may have been different landowners at that time, but it is important we get that deed agreed.
Yeah.
We don't know what's coming forward on this. It is a vacant plot, obviously. Yeah. It can take some form of development, and obviously we will just look into the impact on what goes there in terms of the wider development of the business part and possibly one of the last plots.
It's not owned by the people who are building the hospitals. It's
government.
Or is it owned by?
It's owned by government.
Yeah, Goodman. Yeah. I was going to say Arlington, but you just reminded me it's Goodman.
It is. I think it is owned by Goodman. Although on the application site you probably can't see from the scheme, that little vacant plot is shown as blue, which means that it's in the control and ownership of the applicant. So red is always the application boundary. If anyone shows anything blue, it means the same applicant is in control and ownership of the landmark blue. So it may be a part of another phase, or we will have to report that back to members.
Okay. Right, may I have a proposal?
Just one more question, sorry, just to go back to the parking, I'm sorry to harp on it, but if we're going to make a condition that they have some kind of system for the parking, then I don't know if we can do that. And also, then how is it going to be policed? Because they have to actually get a company in to survey that, or they have to pay for someone to go around and check that vehicles have got the necessary permit in the window. And whenever I've gone to the Clementine Churchill Hospital in Harrow, Their biggest problem is that there's a school nearby, and in the morning you can't get in there because all the mums park in the hospital, and in the afternoon all the mums park in the hospital as well to go and collect the children. So you have to try and make your appointments around the times when it's free. And I don't know whether commuters would find that it would be an easy place to leave their cars, but how would they be able to actually police this? We have to actually, if we're going to suggest it, we need to suggest something that they can do.
I'm not.
Let's think about this. We are satisfied that the number of parking places is sufficient. I think that should be it, actually. We may recommend to them that they have a parking permit scheme, and hospitals that I have unfortunately been to recently, they seem to be pleased not so much by having somebody who patrols around the park giving out tickets, but just because there are notices when you go in there, you must get a parking ticket from reception. And most of the cars when you walk around do seem to have tickets on them. So, but I'll be a bit reluctant to put in it as a condition the parking once as we consider the parking is sufficient. Yeah.
If I may, just a point, I noticed there's a £40 million budget, so I would hope that within that there would be a few pennies to look at parking and the control of parking, because it would be very remiss of us to approve a scheme which then impacted on Manor Road residents. And that would be unforgivable of us as a committee if we could in fact add a condition to say, well actually, you do need to manage your parking, and I don't think it's inappropriate in this instance. Gentleman said hoping to generate 15 million a year. I think they could afford a parking attendant.
I think we can put in that they should have a scheme to monitor the parking, to run the parking, whatever. What I don't think we can do is then say, well, how do we control that and make sure it's...
Sorry, James, at Lister Hospital, they've got a token. So you drive in, you collect your token, and you can't get out unless you've paid or got it stamped, or like in Sainsbury's where you just have it swiped so you can get out. So you can have a token scheme. There's a pub restaurant up in Huntingdon that you've got to get a disc to get out the car park, and everybody in the area knows it. So there is a way.
Chair, I just think it's better that we just put that as an informative on the planning permission, and we hope the operator manages the parking, which I'm sure they will if there's third parties parking in within the site boundaries. I would think it's easy to manage.
Well, they will manage it, because if it's a private hospital, they take private patients, and the private patients can't get in there all the time.
Exactly.
Then they'll stop going.
So I think an informative at the most, really.
Okay, a proposer, please. Okay.
I propose we accept the officer's recommendation with additional conditions on your paper. Condition 18 relating to sound, noise, that's well one. Additional 19 relating to floodlighting, noise pollution as they call it. Additional 20 that there should be no pedestrian access onto Manor Road, and condition 21 that no waste should be incinerated on the site.
Yeah.
And mature boundary planting.
Condition 4 be strengthened to maybe put a pot size of heights.
Yes.
Trees to go in, or should they?
Okay. You second it. Right, those in favour? Right, so we. Thank you.
Chair, just with the added informative, and also it's subject to the satisfactory signing of the 106 agreement to deliver the £6,000 monies and the amendment to the land use.
Right, still a bit of way to go yet, chaps. Right, item 9. Land to the rear of 3139 Cowper Road, Welwyn Garden City. Retention of existing garage block, erection of 3 number 2-bedroom bungalows with formation of 5 number off-street parking spaces.
Thank you, Chairman.
Firstly, I wish to clarify that since completion of the officer's report, amended plans have been received for the application, which were provided to members as part of the late representations. The only amendment that's been made is the change of the windows from grey UPVC windows to now white UPVC windows.
Small mercies.
Otherwise, there's no other changes. Subsequently, condition 1's also been changed to reflect the new plan numbers. The application is presented to you tonight because the applicant is Welwyn Hatfield Borough Council, as it's one of the Borough Council's garage sites. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of 3 single-storey dwellings on a garage site at the rear of Coker Road, which is also located to the rear of properties on Wheatley Road to the east of the site and to the rear of properties on Woodman Close to the south of the site. Access will be gained by an existing driveway from Coker Road at the northwest corner of the plot. An existing block of garages are located at the northern end of the plot would be retained. Each of the 3 proposed dwellings will be of a matching design with a linear footprint measuring approximately 13 metres in length, and would feature pitched roofs with a flat roof detail measuring approximately 4.5 metres in height. Each of the 3 proposed dwellings will be served by an area of private amenity space, and the 3 dwellings will be served by a total of 5 off-street parking spaces provided within the site. This is a brownfield site within the settlement of Welwyn Garden City, where the principle of a residential development is acceptable and which would make good use of what is currently a disused, overgrown, derelict site. The 3 dwellings will be of a modest scale, of a relatively low height, will be almost entirely screened from any public viewpoint, and will be of materials to match surrounding properties. Therefore, it is the officer's opinion that the proposal will be a suitable design in keeping with the character and appearance of the area. Furthermore, due to the scale of the proposed dwellings and the separation distances from existing properties on Coker Road, Wheatley Road and Woodman Close, there will be no adverse impacts on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. It is noted that no objections have been received from neighbours. The existing access will be improved and widened at the entrance on Coker Road. You can see it on there. And 3 dwellings will benefit from adequate provision of off-street parking spaces in accordance with council standards. So, having considered all the aspects of the proposal, the application is recommended by officers for approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Straight away, these proposed council dwellings, have we got a design? Because after
we've got a speaker. We've got a speaker. Right. Speaker on this is Steve Stokes, who is the agent.
Good evening. In support of the application, I'd just like to briefly highlight a few points. Firstly, the context, as you've heard, the site is largely vacant, and it's been, as I understand it, disused for a very long time, perhaps 10 or 15 years, in fact. Secondly, yes, this proposal is part of a larger programme to deliver affordable housing in collaboration with housing associations, but it also represents an opportunity to meet local needs on what is very much a brownfield site. However, the really unique aspect of this site is that it presents a viable opportunity to build bungalows, a typology that is often sought after by residents, but rarely justifiable due to their hungry land take. So it's a very unique opportunity to responsibly build bungalows. In this instance, the site offers the opportunity to deliver 3 bungalows where only 1 or 2 houses would be possible. Furthermore, these bungalows will have gone up into the size that is manageable in terms of upkeep and necessity for this client group, who are unlikely to enjoy the luxury of employing a gardener. The homes are likely to be popular with residents who are currently under-occupying larger family houses, and at first letting will be targeted at older residents and release family homes for those on the council's housing register. Turning to design and technical matters, fire, refuse and highways are satisfied with our proposals, whilst traffic generation is reduced in comparison with the former garage use. The scheme's been designed to current best practice, including secured by design and lifetime home standards. The space standards are generous and provide the space that residents require today. At 64 square metres each, the dwellings exceed the minimum benchmark sizes set out by the Homes and Communities Agency and compare very favourably with volume house builders' offers, which are typically at 55 to 60 for this typology rather than 64. The scheme design is sympathetic to and pays regard to the local vernacular and is to be constructed in red brick with a pitched and tiled roof, each bungalow having its own private front and rear gardens, with the final selections of brick and other materials to be agreed by condition with the planning department. With regard to consultation, following detailed pre-application advice and consultation, the proposals take account of concerns around parking and privacy, detailed consultation with immediate neighbours regarding construction logistics will form part of the council's brief to tenderers. So, to summarise, this proposed development will bring an underused land back into effective use, improve surveillance, safety, and provide new housing in sought-after bungalow form. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors? No.
Thank you very much. I wholly welcome this. This land has been empty, as has been said, for a long period of time, and I'd like to pay tribute to the Estates Department in working closely with me and trying to mitigate some of the problems that we've had there of dumping and so on and so forth, and we've been able to keep the place reasonably tidy. The history, unfortunately, is slightly unfortunate. At the time as a developer came in to work on Woodland Close, I suggested that we approach them and try to incorporate this into one comprehensive development, which I think would have given a better solution. Unfortunately, nobody took the idea up, and so we're now left with this slightly awkward site. But never mind, you've got a scheme, it looks a good scheme, and I wholly welcome it. My concern is the block of garages in the top right-hand corner there. They're in a very poor state. Two of them, the roof is completely staved in, and unfortunately, although the condition is referred to in the officer's report, there's nothing in the proposal or in the conditions to say that that block needs to be restored. I've spoken extensively to Jeremy Morton, and it's definitely his intention that we do, but there's no condition, and you know, things can slip, circumstances can change, the numbers might not add up somewhere the way they do now. And I think it would be extremely unfortunate if this block, that's not the worst part. I can tell you it's further to the right. There's an enormous hole. Quite how anybody's using those, whether they are, I don't know. But I'd like to propose an additional condition. Prior to the, and you know, I've had help on this one. Prior to the commencement of the development hereby granted, a specification for the refurbishment and improvement of the existing block of garages located at the northern end of the application site should be submitted to and shall be approved in writing by the local planning authority. The agreed specification of work shall then be carried out and completed within 6 months of the first occupation of the 3 dwellings hereby granted. Reason to ensure a satisfactory standard of development in the interests of visual amenity in accordance with National Planning Policy Framework and Policies D1 and D2 of the Welling Hatfield District Plan 2005. This is what you see when you approach the site. It would be awful to have that not restored. It's capable of being an attractive building. You can see the old tiles that harmonise with the houses, but I just want to make sure that it actually happens and that we don't sort of slip between the cracks in any way. Yes, you can't see it very well because of the rather overlarge tree on the left, but you know, take it from me, it's in an awful state. So I would ask the committee to apply a condition so that the whole site looks satisfactory and that the residents don't feel ashamed of having to go past that, or the visitors go past it when they first go into the site. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll hang on to that thought. Alan, you were next.
I apologise for jumping in, but after the other meeting where the places look like rabbit hutches, I was just nervous of what the design was going to be like. But if we're going to have pitch roofs with these red clay tiles, it's going to have a better look for the residents. Sorry about the others.
Okay, thank you. Fiona?
Thank you. Just wanted to pick up on the access. I know, I think you mentioned that the access is going to be widened. Can you just put up the picture which just shows the access? No, the other one, the photograph, please.
No, I would like to see the one with the neighbouring houses, please. So, will any of the adjoining properties have to be affected in order to widen the road sufficiently? Do you know?
Yes, the widening would take place on the left as you look at that picture where the hedge currently is. As I understand it, the property you can see the side of on the left of that picture is also council owned. So there'll be a loss of, if you like, front garden to that property to make the access wider.
Okay. And then the other point, with regard to bin storage and refuse collection, I note in the report it suggests that agreement has been reached from the Environmental Department that bins would be presented at the end of the alleyway, is that right? But just hearing that these bungalows are intended for older residents, that might be an issue, and I just think we need to have an understanding of what the agreement is there. Otherwise, we will have to automatically ensure that those residents go on the assisted delivery collection, which obviously has another financial cost to it.
There is the bin issue.
Yeah, so that could be an issue if you're an elderly resident not being able to bring your bin down the path. So could we have some way of mitigating against that? Is there anything?
Well, the bin men will go into sort of back areas to pick up bins.
Only if it's been registered.
Yes. Yeah. So if the people are sufficiently disabled, then it can be done. Right. Nobody else? Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. I think immediately after this meeting I'm going to submit myself for a psychological examination. Twice in the same evening. I'm in agreement with Malcolm. This is very troubling. But I think his thoughts about the state of the garages and their future use, I think is quite relevant, and so I do think we need to take his suggested condition into consideration at least. It shows, and as Alan mentioned last month, it shows we can do it right if we work at it. And this looks like a development where we have got it right, it's in context with the local area, and it's actually fulfilling a need. This may be that we get 3 families moving into larger homes within Welwyn Garden City and the greater environments. So this is good, and this is what we want, and hopefully the one that we kicked out last month because of design issues goes back to the drawing board, takes this as an example and say how can we melt in with the environment more successfully in future, and then we can start moving ahead. So I'm entirely in support of officers' recommendation to approve. Subject to Malcolm's very worthwhile suggested condition, because yes, I wouldn't want to see that when I go into my new home, and I don't think we'll see why anybody else should.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Talk about these garages. If they're that dilapidated, why don't we knock them down and build at least another bungalow there? And I assume that if they're that dilapidated, nobody's using them. Why we not?
If you look at the weeds in front of the door, they're not using them.
No. Why knock them down and put another bungalow in?
Stick a low roof on it. Bungalow roof on
it. I know it isn't.
I can't categorically put my hand on my heart and say why they're not demolishing those, but I know as part of the affordable housing programme, they review every site in terms of its viability and what type of housing is most appropriate, always with the aim of getting the most properties on that site that they possibly can, to obviously fill a much a big need. In relation to the suggested condition from Councillor Cowan, as a person, I can completely understand where he's coming from, and yes, I can see that yes, it would be harmful to the overall character. However, as a planner, we have to look at the guidelines and legislation under which we can apply conditions. And as you are all aware, there's certain tests that must be gone through in order for conditions to be attached. Two of which is that it has to be necessary to the development. So, do the garages have to be refurbed in order to make the development acceptable? No, because the dwellings can be built anyway. And also, is it reasonable? Well, I think that if it fails the first one, it naturally fails the second one. However, because we knew that these concerns were likely to be aired tonight, we have asked the housing team for some advice. So I've got 3 or 4 paragraphs, so if you can bear with me. They advise, as part of the tender process to the Council's register provider framework group, the scheme will include a requirement for bidders to refurbish the garages to an agreed specification provided by the Council. However, it should be noted this element of the build cannot qualify for funding, because obviously the affordable housing programme can only pay for the housing, not for measures such as this. And that's 30% of the legitimate development costs. And that's covered from the right to buy receipts. Bidders, as part of the tender process, will consider the development economics of the scheme and the ability to fund such refurbishments and offer other requirements in the tender, possibly, such as other additional improvements to the surrounding area and possible capital receipts for the council. Therefore, bidders may not be able to provide the refurbishment as required, and if a condition was attached, contrary to officer advice saying it doesn't comply with the tests, they consider that it might delay the letting and occupation of the new homes. However, some good news, we also advise that should the tender be unable to secure the garage refurbishment, that confirmation has been received from the Council's Corporate Property Department that they have the funds available under which to refurbish them.
Okay.
So hopefully from the developers, if not from the council.
Okay, Kathy?
Thank you, Chair. This is a private road. Is it going to continue to be a private road? And if so, who's going to do the maintenance work? I mean, who's going to fund maintenance? It'll be the Borough Council, is it? Because it's council property?
Right, the answer is that the registered provider that takes on those units would be responsible for maintaining that road. However, because the council will retain the garages, they would probably end up paying a contribution also to maintaining that road. So it'd be the responsibility of the registered provider to take on the ownership of the houses.
Which is what the housing does.
Whoever takes them on, so Paradigm or whomever.
Okay, may I have a proposal then, please?
Come on, John. I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation to develop of this site.
Okay, and Steve will second. All those in favour? That's everybody again.
We are unanimous. Mrs. Slocum.
Item number 10 is 2 Chipmunk.
There was also part of your late representations and amended conditions in relation to the drawings. So just to confirm, your vote also included that.
Right, 2 Chipmunk Chase, Hatfield, retention of conservatory.
Chair. Yeah, this application relates to 2 Chipmunk Chase and the actual retention of a conservatory. So the conservatory is in situ. This is the property here. It's a corner site where there are properties in a terrace form. The property takes the corner here. That's the existing property itself, and that's the detached garage. Recently, we've granted planning permission for roller shutter gates to this front garage here and a shed in the back corner here. The application's subject site boundaries, that little infill plot there, so it's going in that little area there, the conservatory. If you can just move. So basically the conservatory occupies a position here. In terms of the adjacent property, which is number 4, there is actually a drive-through here from the main road to the back area here, where there's back parking in terms of the relationship to this boundary. Along this boundary here, there's a 1.8 metre screen-bordered fence. So just going to the proposal. Basically, that's looking from the back garden of the property with the infill conservatory projecting no further back than from the back of the house here. Quite a difference of view in terms of the application forms. It did say we're going to have a slate roof to match the existing house. I did confirm that with the agent and the applicant, and that was an incorrect feature. It is one of the quite important, because this is what the property the concern is from the parish council in terms of the roof, which is a clear glass roof. So that, in terms of the subject area of concern, the principle of the conservatory is fine. It's obviously on a housing site, it's in a residential curtilage, so I've got no issues at all. You can just probably see here that the fencing on this side boundary runs to probably the top of those high level windows at a point there. So I've got no great concerns in terms of the impact of the relationship in terms of privacy. But the town council has got concerns about the goldfish bowl type scenario of being able to look from habitable windows here into this conservatory. We've thought about this, about putting a condition on, like we would obscure glazing. I have talked to the applicant and the agent, and they're willing to put blinds up if it was to be a problem. But at the minute we felt it weren't really necessary, because it's like inward and outward views into the conservatory. It's like a dual privacy issue. The windows are fairly tight on these properties here in terms of their width, and I think someone would have to really want to go and stand in that area and view the goings on, whatever, in the conservatory here. So we didn't think it was reasonable, but we have discussed it about putting the condition on. So, subject to it being completed, and I think there's only minor works to be done in accordance with the plans that we've submitted, we're recommending the conservatory to be retained without any imposition of obscure glazing, blinds or other fixtures.
Okay. Thank you. No, hang on. Do we have Councillor Lily Brandon?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, committee, officers, I was going to say good evening, but I think that might have passed. I feel slightly embarrassed. This was thrown at me at the 11th hour, and I've read this more or less as I've sat there tonight. I've got no objection personally.
Well said.
Something maybe that should be noted moving forward. I know the town council only comment, and I'm very new to all of this. I've sat in on a couple of planning committee meetings they've had since May, and they've never got the full information in front of them of what's going on, and they usually get the plans upside down on the screen as well, which doesn't help. But I think moving forward, if they are going to continue having any input, we do need a lot more information to be passed on from the borough, so it can be discussed properly, because this was obviously a bit of a waste tonight. But I think there could be improvements moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Right, councillors? John? Okay, seconded by Alan. All those in favour? Right, thank you. Item number 11 is Angland Common, Southbury Hatfield. Proposed variation to existing Section 106 agreement in relation to replacement of sports pitches following construction of park and ride facilities or University of Hertfordshire.
Thank you, Chair. We did have a late representation. I think members have probably seen that in the pack earlier in the week, if that's the right terminology, what was sent to them from Hatfield Town Council, which basically the council doesn't agree with the division of the funding in terms of the split of the monies and various other points. But I'm sure members have seen that, so it's something we have to just minute that we have acknowledged that late representation.
Did you say from Hatfield Town Council?
Yes.
Not North Field Parish Council?
No, they were covered in the earlier report.
Right,
I believe
okay.
the second one is from the Town Council, Hatfield Town Council.
Yes.
In terms of the background to the application, obviously the application concerns Angland Common. And back in the 1970s, obviously the whole of the red line boundary was sporting facilities, playing fields in the main, used by Hatfield Polytechnic and the university, as well as local clubs booking through the council. In 2003, the top half of the site was developed by a planning application and subsequent approval of a park and ride facility on basically the top half of the site, which is there. That is now in situ and working. That was to alleviate parking congestion on the University College Lane campus in the residential area in the southern part of Hatfield. In preparation for that park and ride facility, the facilities in and around the bottom part of the site closed, so the sports facilities stopped in around about 2003. As part of the permission to develop out the park and ride, there was a Section 106 agreement that included a number of elements, and one of them, the provision of the lost playing fields had to be replaced in the area here. So basically there was a provision that the lost changing facilities in the park and the sport playing fields had to be re-provided here. That's never happened due to various situations, and you'll go through the agenda. It does explain the development of that. In 2005, for example, permission was granted to provide enhanced standard of playing pitch, floodlighting, grandstand and a clubhouse facilities for the use of Hatfield Town Football Club. But that unfortunately never happened. It was never implemented, funding couldn't be found, and basically the permission lapsed. Between the lapse of that planning permission in 2011 and 2014, further discussions took place. There was a later application granted to facilitate additional facilities on Angland Common in the area here of the subject site. What has happened here now is that there's a situation where the funding has just not come forward. The streams of funding through Sport England and various bodies have not been able to develop the facilities. And obviously at the minute there's a potential breach of the earlier planning permission because that's not being provided. What this application or this agenda item proposes is, and this is after discussions with the University of Hertfordshire, is a new monetary contribution of £1.4 million to provide facilities in the wider area, in the main to Hatfield, but I'll come back to that in a minute. And basically there's a proposed split being agreed, because in the main due to the need for a footballing facility in Hatfield itself. So the split of the 1.4 would be approximately 800,000 to be ring-fenced for football, 100,000 for rugby, and the remainder to be split and made available in the form of grants to other sporting facilities. That's basically because we think the sporting commentators and people involved in that this Angland site is not really suitable for the facility anymore. The location is not really what Hatfield needs in terms to deliver sport across the wider picture. And that is something that's supported by Sport England. They've got no objections to the funding. So what the recommendation here is for members to support the recommendation, the approval that would go for this 1.4 million contribution from the University of Hearts to basically as a deed of variation to the 106. So there's going to be a deed of variation. It would then go into a designated bank account, and that would be administered by the council on behalf of Hatfield Sports Fund. There would be an independent board set up comprising representatives of the council, town council, Arts Sports Partnership, Welling Hatfield Sports Alliance, together with other specialist and non-voted representatives, as required to allocate the sports fund. So the decision really of this committee is not to say how the money is going to be split, where it's going to go, where it's not going to go. The report just talking about it being in Hatfield. I have noted North Mins Parish Council's concern about a facility very close to Anglerland, if you were to think of Anglerland being the subject site, and I acknowledge that that might be something that the board needs to seriously consider in terms of the allocation of some of the monies and where that extra funding may go to enhance a sporting facility that they administer within their parish boundary. But that is something for the board to discuss once it's set up. Not a decision tonight really on who's involved with it and how it's split. So the recommendation is for the 106 to be signed, a deed of variation to the original one that granted the outline planning permission for the park and ride facility, and that hopefully we get some sporting facility. In the main, it probably be maybe a football club for Hatfield as part of the monies. And that is where we're going on it. That's the recommendation. We're supporting it. It meets the test of the MPPF and SIL in terms of the allocation of funds and being reasonably related in kind to the development that was originally granted. So the test is legally tight. It's just how it's administered, how the board operates it, and ultimately how the money is spent.
Thank you. I think the point about North Mins Parish Council is that it is actually in North Mins, which is an important consideration, and I would hope that a member of the North Mins Council would be on the board. Anyway, 3 speakers on this night. The first is Councillor Jackie Walton on behalf of North Mins Council. Yes, in 5 months now.
Look more like yours.
Yes. North Mins Parish Council owns open spaces which include a football pitch, bowling green and pavilion, tennis courts and children's playgrounds in Welham Green, Gobians and Little Heath open spaces, both also with children's playgrounds, and Bradmore Green, which is used occasionally for Rotary charity community events, including a visit from Santa. All these facilities are used and enjoyed by the community, although some do not and never will pay back financially, but in terms of health and well-being, they are invaluable for many parishioners across an age range. It is also timely that this matter has come up now, as just last week there was an arson attack at the Burns Pavilion at Welham Green. The building was slightly damaged, but sadly the local junior football team lost equipment, which for 7 to 8-year-olds is quite a blow. I will focus on Welham Green Recreation Ground, which is geographically nearest to Anglerland. But North Mins Parish Council could also purposefully employ some of the monies for use around its facilities in the parish. For example, new playground items and a personal suggestion, outside fitness equipment for grown-ups. The football pitch at Welham Green is on clay subsoil. It becomes waterlogged and muddy and hence unplayable very often. The adult football club who use it have 2 teams this season and, as mentioned, a junior football team. The pitch is also let out to other users when not booked. North Mins Parish Council have investigated installing land drainage, but we cannot afford this. We verti-drain from time to time, but this is only a temporary solution. It would be great to have a facility which is guaranteed to be usable at all times, if we could improve the ground conditions and the facilities. We would also like to be able to provide equipment for the youngsters particularly, and house these in a substantial storeroom. It may be a dream, but an all-weather surface would answer a lot of problems. The Sports Pavilion building is over 30 years old and needs updating to bring it up to modern standards. The showers have to be seen to be believed. The Parish Council believes better localised facilities would offset the loss of Anglian common sports. Can you stop talking whilst I'm talking, please? Thank you. By ensuring locals could walk to activities aiding health, continue to have opportunities nearby, and if enhanced, these would sustain and encourage increased community involvement. It would only be fair to expend the Section 106 monies in the parish in which Anglian Common is set. Therefore, we request that the Parish Council be invited to be party to discussion about specific amounts and how these are to be utilised for the benefit of the local community. Finally, with reference to item 9 of the officer's report under 8.1, which I think should be 8.13c, a clause must be included for a specific percentage to be allocated to North Mim for alternative sports health provision to offset the non-development of Anglian Common sports facilities in the parish of North Mim. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second speaker is Debbie Brandon from Hatfield Town Council.
Good evening, everybody, again. A couple of points and observations that I believe not only should you should all be made aware of, but should be recorded and minuted. Anglian Common was originally owned by Herts County Council. A joint use agreement was put in place in 1977 between Herts County Council, Welling Hatfield District Council and the Polytechnic. Anglian opened in 1980. In 1991 the Polytechnic upgraded to a university. The title for Anglian Common transferred to the university. They were given it for nothing. It closed in 2003 to build the park and ride, and has never reopened, depriving Hatfield of a facility despite the Section 106 obligation. I honestly believe that the university thought that everybody would forget and we'd go away and they would be left with a prime building plot. We didn't go away. On the 2nd of the 9th, 2014, the university offered Welling Hatfield Borough Council 1.4 million to get out of their Section 106 obligation that would be passed on to the Town Council via a trust for sport in Hatfield. There is no uplift clause in the agreement on a piece of land which could be worth 90 million as a building plot. 100 student apartments, £90,000 each. A build cost of 30 million would leave you 60 million profit on land that was given to them for nothing. It could also return £4 million a year in rent as student accommodation. Hatfield has lost, not since just 2003, but forever, 7 sports pitches, never to be replaced. Can you put a price on this? 1.4 million on a site potentially worth so much is loose change, car boot sale prices. This site still has a joint use agreement between the university and Welling Hatfield Borough Council with no end date. I believe at the very least an uplift clause should be agreed.
Half a minute.
Sorry?
Half a minute.
Half a minute.
Okay.
That can be extended, can it?
No.
No. I don't need any more anyway. On a piece of land that if I was a betting man, I would have a little wager that accommodation of one sort of another would be built there within a few years. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Final speaker tonight is Councillor Kieran Thorpe. on behalf of the Borough Council. It says.
I'd like to think it was. Good evening, councillors. It's been a while since I spoke at this committee, and I note it's lost none of its pizzazz. I don't want to take up too much of your time, or it's been a long evening already, but I feel it's important to speak on this item, though technically not in my ward of South Hatfield. Realistically, it is. And I just would like to draw your attention to the arson attack that was mentioned. Mr Maloney was mentioning just then that he's actually raised money through donations from the people of Hatfield to replace the kits that were lost in that attack. So I think that's fantastic. As most of you will know, this is an issue that's dragged on for a very long time, and I don't want to get into why, because we'll be here all night, but I wanted to clarify what is going on to members. University has a Section 106 obligation to reinstate playing pitches at Angland, and they haven't. Because of this, football doesn't have a home in Hatfield, suitable for Hatfield's flagship team. This has dragged on for well over a decade. The university did little, this council did little, and other parish councils did nothing. More recently, discussions were held, which I was part of, to compromise. The university will pay their way out of it, as you've heard, and that money can be used to fulfil the promises of the Section 106 obligation, to reinstate pitches. So absolutely, I support that. It's a way to resolve this issue, and it should have happened a long time ago. The issue that arises, as you've been told, is not really for this committee to get involved with, but it's an issue that I think is important to be put on the record, and I would urge you to. The issue of this council that will receive the money, using it for purposes really related to the Section 106 obligation. This council is planning to use nearly a third of the 1.4 million to benefit sports in a wider sense. In Hatfield, as I understand it, although that sounded a little less certain from what was read out by the officer, by handing it out in scraps to whoever asks for it, that hasn't asked for it yet. This has nothing to do with reinstating pitches, and that actually jeopardises pitches being reinstated. Pitches we don't have. Other parishes may have pitches that their team plays on, we have none. 800,000 going to football sounds like a lot of money, but they're starting from nothing, a field. They need to build facilities that will allow football in Hatfield to be played at the level it already represents, let alone planning for the future. Hatfield's flagship team has children's teams, women's teams, disabled teams. None of them can play in Hatfield. £800,000 does not cut it. It's just not enough. So it's not that far away either. So why is it only 800,000 when the university is paying us 1.4 million? There was a sort of consultation on this matter, and you've got extracts from that in your agenda. This very concern was raised time and time again by several parties. Doesn't seem to have made any difference yet. My concern is that this council, by sheer ignorance and bloody-mindedness, is going to render the objectives of the reason that there was a Section 106 agreement in place as a failure. When the playing pitches closed all those years ago, football lost out, rugby lost out, other sports didn't, other councils' teams didn't, Hatfield teams did. Other sports haven't done anything to progress this issue. Other sports aren't knocking on the door asking for this money, though I'm sure they will. I'm not saying that there can't be a fund for other sports in Hatfield for other purposes, kits, equipment, to benefit from this, but I'm saying it shouldn't be £500,000, an amount that will leave the real purpose for this in jeopardy, and I'd really like you to consider that. I appreciate it's not the issue solely before you, but I think it's a really important one going forward, and one that isn't going to go away.
Thanks, Jim. Right, councillors, comments? John.
Chairman, this report makes big issue of how the cake is cut up. But when we get to the recommendation, there's no reference to that whatsoever in purely the principle of this amount of money, 1.4 million. Well, are we, with the suggestion, looking through the paragraph 8.1c, that the whole thing is up for grabs and there's something to be negotiated? So should we this evening get bogged down with how the cake is cut?
No.
I don't think we should. I think we should decide whether we can go along with the 1.4 million or not, Chairman. And it might be an idea, if we do go along with this, that we let North Mims have a seat at the table, as in 8-1C.
It's interesting, isn't it? The site's in Green Belt, isn't it? Yes. Not been put forward as housing.
Yet.
Remind me how large the site is.
14 hectares.
14 hectares. Right. Yeah, so 35 acres, 2 million an acre, 70 million. Yes, and we're getting 1.4.
Chair, can just add something?
Yes.
The 1.4 comes from negotiations with the university, and it's linked back to what they had to do as part of the 106, which was to provide some more sporting pictures and some changing facilities that I don't think were stadia type at that time. So it's an equivalent thereabouts of what they had to do. We can't ask for the uplift that's been mentioned is nothing to do with what this application or this 106 debate of this 1.4 million. They would have to demonstrate very special circumstances because it's Greenbelt to get any development on there. We could then attach obligations up to whatever pounds and pence to meet the infrastructure needs of whatever went on there, whether it be new flats, housing, student facilities, whatever. So we can't go over and above what was reasonably asked for at the time of the 106 being put in place. And I think Councillor Nichols is right. The 1.4 split is not for this board to decide.
No,
the simple principle is whether or not this board supports the facilities being provided on site or goes with the recommendation of a 1.4 million contribution to be split up through a setting up of a proper board, bank account, administration. The only thing I would say is that if we need to build in the North Mims situation at C, 8.1C, we need to just get the wording a little bit more tighter. Where we see application for sports clubs and groups serving Hatfield, that is for this committee to decide as well. Obviously, that wasn't meant to exclude North Mims in any way, but if we feel that recommendation doesn't embrace their vision and the need to enhance that facility seemingly is with it, and it's not becoming.
We could just add.
We could and/or adjacent parish. I don't know. I'm only thinking aloud, but it needs to go in now. Because someone could say that is only serving Hatfield. But at the minute, okay. So.
Okay. Right, Mike.
That helps.
Yes, thank you.
Just something. John says in the recommendation, yes, talk about the 1.4 million, but in the report on 2.9, it says approximately 800,000 to be ring fence. And if we've agreed that there's a figure to be ring fence, it should be in the recommendations before the committee. Otherwise, it's going to go to some other body, and football and rugby could lose out.
So what you're saying is to agree with 2.9. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, well, either paragraph 2.9 or agree with what Kieran suggested of a split of 1,100,000 and 300. Yeah.
I think Councillor Larkin is right what he's saying, but I think 2.10 just clarifies that the current report to this committee is seeking the decision of the council as a local planning authority as to whether it supports the alternative solution in principle. I think the recommendation doesn't need to split the monies at this stage.
It's not for us to split the money.
I don't think,
Can't we give an informative?
Yeah.
Why can't we give an informative?
We can't do the planning obligation. If it's setting up a board.
What the hell's hoop in this for anyway.
Yeah.
If it's not to be trying to be
I
informative.
think this is giving context to where the debate has been up till now, and it does say in 2.9 the total contribution under discussion, and approximately, I think the purpose is it is the responsibility of that board. That's the intention set of the board. That's one of the recommendations. We should leave that to them with the relevant parties involved, rather than this committee doing so at this point. It's like a recommendation.
Okay, Steve, right?
Well, here I go again. I actually agree with Kieran and the chap that spoke earlier as well, giving us a little bit of the history and context of this. This looks clearly as though this was football's issue, and I think there were rugby pictures that that Howard has played on subsequently. So what the hell other sports are doing involved, okay, it'd be nice, but I'm just concerned 1.4 million just seems to me from an obligation that is 10 years now overhanging, that's part of. Have we got enough value for taxpayers' money? Have we got enough for these to compensate for this lack of facility? I mean, it's crying out. And we as a council, I understand, we have made a commitment that we want to do the best for Hatfield Town Football Club, so we should be trying to do that in every way we can. Now, okay, we can't put an informative. You've got all this nonsense in the report, and including other things that are not associated with football and rugby. They go in the report. Kieran makes a very sensible suggestion to say, well, let's have the bulk of it for football, not for other nonsense. And no, we can't do anything about it because it's going to be to another planning, another committee to decide. I'm not happy. If I can only get 1.4 million, if that's all that's on the table, if that's the best you can do, then that's what's before me. I'm going to have to say yes. But
well, from what from what we heard,
a split that doesn't recognise where the original thinking, and thanks to the guy who actually gave the explanation of where the pitches that were originally there were predominantly football, and there was as I say, Howard's played a rugby. I mean, without that context, which should have been in this report as well, to put it into proper context, because they've been damned unfair.
We heard a moment ago that the sum of money was the amount that was assessed to be equivalent to what they would have had to have provided at the time.
Yeah, that was 10 years ago.
Yes. So, just to come on to that, does that figure, was that the money at the time plus inflation up to now, or just the money at the time?
And compensation for lack of facilities.
Well, no, if you had, inflation over 10 years might be.
They have taken away a public.
You might not go back.
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay, we'll go on then. Nick, you're next.
Steve's pretty much said it all.
I'm a big mouth.
As somebody that played football and rugby, the number of
at the same
pitches
time.
at the same time. The point Kieran made, it's the biggest participation sport, and I was just unhappy. Team.
You didn't say that, you said participation.
No, I corrected myself on the spot. It was just the wording in 2.9. It looks like we were agreeing this, and it's just a rubber stamping exercise for the committee. The wording just doesn't feel right to me. Whether I agree, I know we're not here to decide the split, but it looks like we're rubber stamping.
I want more. Much more.
I just wanted to make that same point about inflation, which we haven't got an answer to yet.
Excuse me, we can't go back to the university to get any more money. This is what has been assessed. It's taken forever to get this far.
So we have to make do with Buckingham's choice, is that what we're saying? Why is it always the council has to roll over?
Well, look, up to now, we must assume that the members of the council, the officers and the councillors who have been negotiating with the university have done their very best to get what money they can do. Because our negotiating team would not have gone in to just get whatever was on offer and done the worst they could have done. we assume they would have done their best to get what they could.
Well, they charge £3 a pop to students to get on this park and ride. They must have made hundreds of thousands in the meantime anyway. So it's not into 1.4 million.
No, that's not part of it. We heard tonight the value of the land, either then or now, is not what we're talking about.
No, I'm talking about the income from the park and ride.
Yes, but that's not...
£3 a pop.
But that's not to do with the money we're talking about.
Well, they have the money.
Do we know why it has taken 9 years to sort this out?
Well, they did come with planning applications, didn't they? We presumably we talked about it for a long time.
I think it's funding. They've not been able to secure the match funding or the different types of funding that's been required, and there's been two obviously permissions granted since that period, and it's just not come forward. There's been. I mean, if you read, obviously members have read it through the report. It's just not been able to get the third parties on board to deliver the project.
The reason I ask is because obviously if this had been settled back in 2006, then we wouldn't be quibbling about the amount of money on offer. But 9 years on, the value of 1.4 million.
And the lack of amenity value for all that time.
Absolutely. So I know this is out with the remit of our committee, but maybe we need to defer to get some further information as to
are we getting good value?
Are we getting good value for money? And actually, are we reassured that the split will be decided by this board and is not as stated in 2.9, because there are a number of concerns about the split, not least about the total pot of money. And just finally, in section A of 8.1, when it says the removal of the obligation to replace sports pitches, is that the removal of the university's obligation? Because at the moment it reads the removal of any obligation, which I would be concerned about.
The university's obligation.
That would need to be included in the report then if that's the case, Chair.
Mandy?
I may be completely wrong, but the figure, the original figure of 1.1 million seems to be in my head.
Right.
And I don't think that it was a huge amount, because when it was originally proposed to reinstate with a much better facility at Angland, and the proposal was to have, my understanding is that the proposal was going to be for one clubhouse to have football, rugby and cricket facilities there.
Yes, it was.
And the cricket couldn't be delivered, and without the cricket there wasn't sufficient income in order to do it, so the whole thing fell away. And I may be completely wrong, but I think it was only about 1.1 million.
Okay. Yes, Malcolm?
Thanks, Ed. Just chip in. Obviously, I'm not an expert and I don't recall all the history, but I have been around long enough in this district to remember when Hatfield Town played in the Birchwood area, and they appear to have been pushed from pillar to post ever since. I also understand that the town council have had an agreement, a working party looking into the football issue, and have come up with a figure of £1 million to set the football club up in the way that would be sustainable, to give it a pitch that would last and not be cut up every time somebody kicks the grass. And I think the danger is you start chipping away from that and saying, oh well, let's have a nice large amount for everything else, undefined. You don't do anything properly. You know, if the work's been done and come up with £1 million as the price tag for getting a decent facility for the football club after many years of being transient, I think it's far better to say, let's stick with that, and then, okay, there's a bit less for other things. But if nobody's in the queue, then, you know, should that take money away from football? Let's do one thing properly. Let's do one thing properly, and then see what's left afterwards.
But that will be decided. That will be decided by the committee that is set up to do this. What we're doing now is really to say, are we going to accept this money in lieu of the 106? That's it. That's it. May I have a proposal there?
I'm not comfortable with it.
No.
officers have not given us an explanation of how this figure was calculated. We've had Mandy has given us actually something more useful, at least trying to say that there was a base figure of 1.1 million. You know, I've told you that they've made thousands of income each year from this particular land. But what you're talking about is what can be negotiated. If these people are making money, income in the meantime, it means that they are more easily able to be able to pay a reasonable figure.
No, that's not right. You have to go back to what the 106 agreement required, and you try and make an assessment of a sum equivalent to the 106. Nothing to do with the profit on the land, nothing to do with, as I brought up, you know, the fact that it's 30 acres or whatever, all irrelevant. What matters is what the 106 would have cost. And
that's not what officers have said. They've said they've negotiated and this is the best they can get.
Hang on a minute. No, you said that the negotiations were based on getting the equivalent sum to what they were required to do. And so that is.
But they can't even tell us whether inflation's been allowed or.
Because we need to ensure that what they give us is going to pay for replacement of the pitches, and 800,000 will not pay for the football pitch and the club. You need 1 million for that.
No.
You won't even do it with 1 million. You won't even do it for 1,500,000.
So why are we accepting
it was not.
You won't do it.
It was not to allow for the replacement of the pitches. The 106 agreement, the money is equivalent to what the 106 was for at the time.
Which was for the replacement of the pitches.
Yeah. Well, look, what do you want to do about this?
We need more information.
Yeah, can we move reference it back to for further information? For a month or 4 weeks or whatever.
I want to see the figures.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, better than.
Right. Here is a proposition that
1.8 million.
We agree tonight the principle of this, subject to the officers, Mandy and I, going back and checking whether that money includes the inflationary provision as well. If it does, then we've gone through the correct procedure. If it doesn't, we'll bring it back to the committee next time.
Not unhappy with that.
No,
I mean,
if it doesn't, we can look to negotiate that.
Yeah, if it doesn't, we will renegotiate, bring it back.
But are you saying also that the fact that this was supposed to be a community facility and has not been for 10 years has got no value in terms of not fulfilling their 106 obligation and therefore should not be added to the value?
It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't.
What this is a deed of variation of that original agreement rather than a new negotiation on a new figure. I think that's how it's got to be looked at.
Right, John,
because I think we're all mystified as where this magic figure's come from.
Absolutely.
But it looks to me that under H2, where it says the university is prepared to meet its obligations by replacing what was there, well, the answer is, I suppose, that everything moved on and what was there is not acceptable today, and there's no more money, therefore we're stuck. About 18 months ago, the university was expecting to build something rather better, and that's why they made that grant application. But it looks as though that's what it is, that's the estimate or assessment of the cost of reinstating something to the original standard.
At that time, which therefore would mean the cost of doing it now.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's yeah. So if we add the bits and pieces we've gained this evening, perhaps that's the answer. And the 1.4 million isn't quite taken out of the air.
How do we do?
Your
guess
all
is
I can
my
say is, and I haven't had any involvement in it at all, except for occasional briefings on it. This has been a very, 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 very long negotiation.
Yes,
started, I mean, it was, Chris Conway was dealing with it for many years.
John.
Unfortunately, I agree with Kieran. We need a football pitch for Hatfield, and as soon as we can.
Yeah, but
it's gone on long enough.
That's not what this is about. This is about it's like a sum of damages, really. It's to put us back into a situation we would have been in if they would have undertaken their... Yes.
But 10 years ago.
But again, we're still, I've got back to 2.9. It says to be ring fenced. You know, 800,000. But I still maintain that should be in the recommendation.
That's not
that the split should be.
But that's not up to us to decide.
No.
And determine. That's
No.
surely up
That's
to
why
the
I understand why it's in the report.
Yeah, why was it in the report then?
Yes.
Can we not just agree to set up a board to decide how they're going to give the money out?
That's in the
To say
recommendation.
Then football and Hatfield will then
That's what the board is
lose out.
about. Why can't we just do that? Say the board will agree to for a board to decide how the money's spent.
But
Hatfield Town Football Club will lose out.
No, but the
No,
plan...
they'll have a person on the board, or more than one person.
No, what we've got to decide tonight is not the setting up of the board, which is part of it, but it is the recommendation that the money is accepted in lieu of the 106, or part of 106.
And that's what I feel. I'm happy, Stephen, if you can be satisfied as chairman of this committee that we have got on behalf of our 106 agreement full value for it. Then I'm prepared to vote in favour.
I need someone to propose that then. Thank you. And second it. Yeah. Mandy,
No, it's right, I think.
are you content with that? Fine.
Yeah. So we will go back, find out if it is 1.4 includes that uplift, then we accept it.
And you're telling me definitely we cannot have the loss of use over 10 years, we cannot claim for that. You know, this is an obligation they should have fulfilled 10 years ago. They haven't done it, whatever the reasons. This is, you know, we could have raised lots of income from football during that period.
We've got to make a proper decision.
You can't take the easy route out on this item. Just give us a question time in 5 minutes.
We're just going on and on and on, the same thing over and over again.
I've got obviously lots of people behind this. But from what I understand, I'm late on the scene with this football thing, Angleland was the Polytech grounds. And he said that. Hatfield Football Club, Hatfield Sports Club didn't use those facilities, to my knowledge. Am I right or wrong?
He's right.
It just told us that everybody used the football facilities. And then it was handed over to the party.
Hatfield played, Hatfield Town played off ground length Birchwood, as Sandy said, right? Angleland was never their home ground.
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, you played there.
You did play there, right?
Right, so we've got that proposition, which Irene has proposed. May I have a second? Oh no, Kathy seconded that. All those in favour, please show.
Nine in favour.
Those against? Who against? Yes. Yeah. Four against. Okay.
Does that include the addition of
North
North
Mid? Yes, it does. And by next meeting, you will either hear that it was the right figure after negotiation, or
I've got a feeling that's what would have the answer.
Right. How's the breakfast to that side? Right. Item 12, appeal decisions. 100%. Item 13, future applications. Okay.
Can I just say on the future planning applications, in respect to Hornbeam Lane, it's an interesting site. So you may wish to go along. It is a public motorway that runs along the side, and you can walk all the way into Cucumber Lane. So you may wish to have a look, particularly in relation to the contours, etc. It will be quite muddy. So obviously you will be
Okay, thank you. Item 14, the Development Management Report, Performance Report.
I shall keep this quite short because obviously it's quite late. Still excessively busy within the department, and as you'll be aware, over the last 2 quarters we have had 2 senior staff leave, and the former Charlie, the enforcement officer, and Richard, principal officer. We've also had the introduction of the new IT system at the end of July. You'll note, paragraph 3.2, that our performance has slipped a little bit. Majors, we're still on track. Others and minors, yes, they are below target. However, we are confident that over the next quarter that we've overcome the little blip with the new IT, etc., and that we will now be back on track. Just to clarify, the government, in terms of their targets for authorities, it's going to be 50% for both majors and minors. And appeals as well, that's also slipped, so we've only won one, which was 20%. However, of the appeals, you'll note 3 were committee decisions, 2 in line with officer recommendation for refusal, 1 of which was overturned. Sorry, 2 in line with officer recommendation, 1 overturned on appeal. We'll have a normal report for you.
In 3 months' time.
Yeah.
Any questions on that? No? Okay, right. Final item, any other business, is Park Farm, Northall Road, West Northall, and this is the, you've seen it before, it's the report in the extra items.
If you go to a few back pages till you get to the site plan, I'm sure you'll remember it. It's the area that you can see outlined in blue. We issued the enforcement notice. The appellant has appealed and the inquiry is set up for April next year. We've been in discussion with him, and because of his personal circumstances, it's likely that he will be moving out in due course anyway. We, as officers, consider, well, a variety of issues, one of which is financial, that if we were to amend the timescale of the enforcement notice and we issue another one, so they have to vacate the building and comply with the notice by October 17, then we will be pretty much on the same track as if we went through the inquiry. Because the inquiry, earliest we get a decision will be 6 months, which is the latter part of next year, and then they've obviously got to move out in any case and comply with that notice. So it's just a change in relation to the timescale, which we think will be a winner, so we might have the £10,000 to £20,000 costs as well for the inquiry.
Chair, may I just ask what happens if, when that date comes, that he decides no, he doesn't want to move out and he wants further extension? We've wasted all this time.
If he doesn't appeal the new notice, and we're fairly confident he won't, he doesn't own the land, so he's letting it from the owner. If he doesn't comply with the notice, obviously we'll be back in front of you to either prosecute or to take direct action ourselves. But that could be the same even if we went to inquiry. Or potentially, whilst we don't think we'd lose the inquiry, obviously that is a risk as well.
Okay, all happy with that, but because it's an enforcement notice, I just want a proposition and a second for it. So, thank you. I'll second it. Are you all agreed with that? Yes. Okay. That's it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for a long night.